Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles. Chapter 2062, Bronze Dragon King. A Dragon. Shifeng stared at the titanic figure before him in disbelief. Even though he stood several hundred yards away from the dragon, its aura felt as if he stood before a towering mountain. The pressure he felt from the dragon was absolutely stifling. Its aura was so powerful that he couldn't even move. He could only stand there quietly, staring at the being. Powerful. Destruction. Death. These words ran through Shifeng's mind as the dragon's aura washed over him. Bronze Dragon King, Dragon, Tier 5, Level. HP. / Shifeng had no doubt that the slightest exhale from this bronze dragon could turn him to dust. Even a Tier 5 existence would be powerless before this bronze dragon king. A dragon's life rating was extremely high, and once it reached adulthood, it would automatically advance to Tier 5. The weakest Tier 5 dragon was an apex existence among other Tier 5 beings, and even during the gods' era, the dragon race had been one of the most powerful. Even gods and demons were afraid of dragons. Meanwhile, among dragons, there were dragon kings. Dragon King's bloodline was beyond the reach of ordinary dragons. At Tier 5, they could even contend with Tier 6 gods. If a Tier 5 human NPC encountered a Tier 5 Dragon King, they'd have no hope of surviving. If they were wise, Tier 6 god-ranked players would take the long way around a Tier 5 Dragon King. Trying to fight such a being head-on would be the epitome of foolishness. Fortunately, this Bronze Dragon King was sealed within a magic array. Otherwise, Shifeng wouldn't have even had time to run. With a wave of his claw, the Bronze Dragon King could send Shifeng on a free trip back to White River City. This is the final test? After seeing the raging Bronze Dragon King behind the magic barrier, Shifeng shifted his attention to his surroundings. The hall contained a second magic array, and within it sat a resplendent box. Most players might not think much of this box, but Shifeng, who was unusually familiar with God's domain, realized that this box had been made with 7 luminaries crystal. 7 luminaries crystal was incomparably valuable to both players and NPCs. It was one of the reasons that so many major corporations invested in God's domain. Nothing else in the hall grabbed Shifeng's attention. Unlike the previous halls, this one only contained a guardian boss. There weren't any mobs for Shifeng to kill. Although Shifeng wanted to approach and inspect the Bronze Dragon King, his powerful aura prevented the swordsman from moving. After raging for another 10 seconds or so, the Bronze Dragon King eventually calmed down. The ferocity of its aura also began to lessen, and Shifeng regained control of his body. But as soon as Shifeng began to relax, the imprisoned dragon spoke. Little human. The fact that you have reached this place proves that you have some ability. According to the rules those despicable gods and demons had set, I will give you 3 options, the Bronze Dragon King said, watching Shifeng. Your first option is to accept my trial. If you pass, you'll receive the treasure those gods and demons left behind. Taking the gods and demons' oath is your second option. You can also acquire the treasure this way. Your third option involves signing a contract with me. Although you won't get the treasure, you will receive my blessing. My blessing will grant you strength beyond human limits. Make your decision. Although the Bronze Dragon King spoke in the dragon language, which Shifeng knew nothing about, he was actually able to understand the Dragon King's intentions. There are choices. The situation surprised Shifeng a little. He had never imagined that the final hall in the ancient god's maze would offer him choices. He had never heard of such a thing. According to his knowledge regarding the Secret Keys trial, players weren't given any choices. If players wanted any of the trial's treasures, they had to defeat the guardian bosses, yet he now had 3 options to consider. The first option was undoubtedly the standard procedure. If players were confident of their strength, the first option would be the best. The second option allowed players to obtain the treasure without risking themselves overmuch. Many players would likely choose this option without a second thought. This was the final hall in the ancient god's maze, after all. The treasure in this room would be extraordinary, but Shifeng understood one thing: there were no free lunches in this world. Current players might know nothing about gods and demons' oaths, but he did. During his previous life, these oaths had earned the nickname divine contracts, and every one of them was a two-way deal. By signing a divine contract, players would have to abide by the conditions the gods and demons had set. If they failed to do so, they'd suffer a miserable fate. Many in the past had eagerly signed divine contracts and failed to meet the stipulated conditions, and in the end, they had suffered such severe penalties that they had been forced to delete their accounts. Hence, while the second option the Bronze Dragon King had stated sounded good, the risk was considerable. The third option wasn't much different than the second, although this contract would be between the player and the Bronze Dragon King. There was no real difference between signing the Bronze Dragon King's contract and signing one with gods and demons. Although the third option wouldn't award the final haul's treasure, a Dragon King's blessing was just as extraordinary. Any blessing held great significance to players, especially the Bronze Dragon Kings. Its effects were likely even stronger than that of a bloodline. Blessings were so valuable in God's domain because of how few were granted. Only incomparably powerful existences could bless others, and those that received a blessing would acquire great power. However, this power had its price. The blessing's giver would have to segment a fraction of their strength, granting it to their target. In other words, the blessing giver would lose strength to empower others. Hence, even Tier 6 gods were incredibly careful when offering a blessing. They never gave one on a whim. "May I know what the oath's conditions are?" Shifeng asked after giving the matter some thought. "This I cannot answer. You may only learn more about the oath after taking it. This is a condition those gods and demons set for me so long ago," the Bronze Dragon King explained indifferently. "Human, I do not have much patience. You only have 10 minutes to consider." "Can't tell me, huh?" Shifeng realized what was happening after listening to the Bronze Dragon King's words. Since players could obtain the treasure by taking the oath, its conditions were undoubtedly quite strict. However, whether or not a player could accept these conditions remained unknown. By denying players the oath's details, players couldn't determine the condition's severity. This also ensured some sense of fairness to the Bronze Dragon King's situation. If players knew the oath's conditions, they wouldn't bother with the dragon's blessing. "Human, what is your choice?" the Bronze Dragon King demanded in a deep tone after 10 minutes had passed. After taking in a deep breath, Shifeng replied, "The first option." Whether it was the gods and demons' oath or the Bronze Dragon King's contract, the risk was too great. On the off chance that he couldn't fulfill the conditions, he would have to delete his account and start all over again. He didn't dare take such a gamble. "What? The first option?" Shifeng's decision stunned the Bronze Dragon King. "Are you sure that is your choice?" Chapter 2063, Suppressed Swordsmanship. Confusion flashed in the Bronze Dragon King's eyes as he watched Shifeng. He was so surprised by this swordsman's answer that he couldn't help but ask for confirmation. "Yes. I choose to accept your trial, Dragon King," Shifeng said, nodding. "You really are a strange human. Ever since this maze was built, thousands of adventurers have visited, but none have accepted my trial because they already knew what outcome awaited them. Do not think my trial is so easy to complete," the Bronze Dragon King growled. "But since you have decided, according to the rules the gods and demons have set, if you can survive against me for 3 days, you will pass my trial. Let's begin." The Bronze Dragon King began to chant an incantation, and abruptly, he began to disintegrate into countless particles of light, passing through the magic barrier the gods and demons had set up. After passing through the barrier, these particles of light gathered to form a humanoid shape before Shifeng. After a short moment, a soldierly, middle-aged man in a suit of bronze stood within the hall. Unlike ordinary people, golden, divine runes marked this man's face and body, as if they were a seal. Death and destruction filled his amber eyes, which didn't contain a shred of humanity. Humanization? Shifeng stared at the soldierly man in astonishment. extremely few beings were capable of humanization in God's domain. Rather, only legendary monsters were capable of the feat. Not only was humanization a sign of peerless strength, but it was also proof of a monster's frightening intellect. To current players, a monster's intellect, at most, equated higher combat standards, making these monsters more difficult to defeat than normal monsters. However, as players progressed through the game, they would discover that monsters with high intellect were absolute nightmares. Humanized monsters had, in the past, turned many kingdoms and empires upside down. One kingdom had even perished during a humanized monster's attack. That monster had merely been a Tier 4 mythic ranked creature, and by that time, many experts had already reached the same tier. However, even after the various superpowers had combined their strength, the humanized monster had annihilated their forces. Since no one was capable of stopping the monster's rampage, the kingdom had been obliterated in the end. The humanized monsters that had been defeated had only lost because they had been Tier 3 beings. Even so, defeating these monsters had required a large group of Tier 4 experts and a collection of powerful tools. This was when players had realized the horror of high-intellect monsters in the past. The humanized monsters' superhuman-like combat standards had even surpassed that of domain realm experts. In fact, the two weren't even on the same level. Human, according to the gods' and demons' rules, I will not use my full power against you. Moreover, you have 300 chances to succeed. You simply need to survive against me for 3 days, the Bronze Dragon King said as he smiled at Shifeng. If you don't have any more questions, let the slaughter begin. Shifeng's expression darkened as an unprecedented chill wrapped around him. Almost instinctively, Shifeng activated Void Shield, and his mind went on maximum alert. Although he had known that this trial wouldn't be easy, he hadn't expected it to be this difficult. Players that hadn't experienced this situation might assume that the conditions for the Bronze Dragon King's trial were quite simple. They only had to survive against a level 70, Tier 3 monster for 3 days, and they were given 300 lives to do so. Even an ordinary expert could clear this trial with ease, much less a peak expert. However, Shifeng recognized this for what it was. This was a one-sided slaughter. Chapter 2064, Realm that Surpasses Human Limits. As Shifeng executed Sword's transmigration, 5 sword lights intercepted the Bronze Dragon King's silent attacks. Boom. Boom. Boom dash. Deafening metallic clangs echoed throughout the hall, and the collision's resulting shockwave was so intense that it made Shifeng shudder. Moreover, his arms had gone numb from the impact. It was so severe that he struggled to move them. The Bronze Dragon King had leisurely executed his attacks, and his basic attributes were only slightly higher than Shifeng's, yet he generated enough power to overwhelm Sword's transmigration's strength tolerance. Shifeng could barely understand what could cause such a result. Without waiting for Shifeng to recover, the Bronze Dragon King's Dragonscale Greatsword vanished once more. Unlike before, however, the Dragon King's attack was truly silent. Shifeng couldn't sense the slightest hint of the Dragon King's attack trajectory before he felt a stinging pain in his chest. Before he realized it, the Bronze Dragon King had thrust his greatsword in Shifeng's chest, his HP depleting rapidly without signs of stopping. He is already beyond human limits. Shifeng looked up at the Dragon King in surprise as the humanized boss retrieved his weapon. Shifeng's vision darkened as his HP fell to 0, and he fell to the ground, lifeless. Sword's transmigration was the strongest combat technique Shifeng possessed. He was even confident of posing a threat to domain realm experts by relying on the technique. However, against the Bronze Dragon King, Sword's transmigration had only kept him alive for one move. The Bronze Dragon King was an apex existence in God's domain. Both his attacks and movement techniques were simply amazing. The Dragon King could launch his attacks without alerting Shifeng, as if the boss's boy acted without commands from his mind. The Bronze Dragon King's reflexes were so fast that Shifeng's mind couldn't even react. Although such a feat was normally impossible, the Bronze Dragon King had done it. He had completely surpassed human limits. Shifeng finally realized why the various superpowers in the past had dispatched tons of Tier 4 experts to defeat Tier 3 humanized monsters that were a much lower level, and even they, the players, had still suffered tremendously to secure victory. 5 seconds after Shifeng died, he appeared before the magic array that had sealed the Bronze Dragon King with full HP. It felt as if the skirmish had been a dream. However, when Shifeng glanced at the Bronze Dragon King's humanoid form nearby, he understood that this was no dream. "Alright, let's begin the second round," the Bronze Dragon King stated as he unsheathed his dragon-scale greatsword and resumed his attacks. Now that Shifeng had experienced the Dragon King's power, he didn't dare clash with the boss head-on. If he wanted to avoid dying 300 times in 3 days, he needed to buy as much time for himself as possible. With this in mind, Shifeng turned and fled. As if he had predicted this ploy, the Bronze Dragon King threw his greatsword at Shifeng, forcing the swordsman to a halt to avoid the flying weapon. Taking advantage of the brief pause, the Dragon King appeared behind Shifeng, and without alerting the player, another dragon-scale greatsword appeared in the boss's hands, swinging toward Shifeng before he had time to register the movement. Fortunately, Shifeng had expected something like this and had activated Divine Steps a moment earlier. He promptly switched places with one of his doppelgangers, which were invulnerable to attacks. The following events happened as Shifeng had expected. Once the Bronze Dragon King realized that the doppelganger before him was immune to damage, he attacked the other Shifeng copies. Although Shifeng couldn't perceive the Dragon King's strikes, he knew that everyone revealed some weakness when attacking. Discovering the Bronze Dragon King's weakness was precisely his goal. Following which, Shifeng swapped positions with the same doppelganger. He then turned and slashed at the Guardian boss. As the Dragon King attacked another doppelganger, his side was exposed. Seeing this, Shifeng was ecstatic, and the hand that held Killing Ray sped towards the opening. Dang! However, just before the sacred sword met its target, an imperceptible attack countered the weapon, stopping its advance. So fast! The counterattack made Shifeng realize that even if he found an opening in the Bronze Dragon King's defenses, he couldn't take advantage of it. The Dragon King was far faster than Shifeng and could easily defend himself once he detected the incoming strike. Relying on speed to defeat the Bronze Dragon King would be impossible. Before Shifeng could follow up with another attack, the Bronze Dragon King shoved his greatsword through Shifeng's chest again, and the swordsman collapsed. Although Shifeng suffered a second death, he didn't feel discouraged. Since he was no match for the Bronze Dragon King's speed, he'd have to contend with this opponent through his strength. After running away to buy time and evading the Dragon King's thrown greatsword, Shifeng had realized that he couldn't shake off the boss. His only option was to face the Dragon King directly. On his third attempt, Shifeng used Shadow Blade and merged the 10 blades into pairs. He then sent the 5 pairs of blades flying at the Bronze Dragon King. The Dragon King found Shifeng's attempt at retaliation amusing. In response, the Dragon King swung its greatsword at the 5 attacks' convergence point. The convergence point of each attack was the size of a strand of hair, but the Bronze Dragon King countered all 5 pairs with the tip of his greatsword, nullifying 1 blade in each pair. This effectively transformed the 5 combination attacks into 5 ordinary attacks. The Dragon King's counter had also altered the remaining blades' trajectories. After nullifying Shifeng's shadow blades, the Bronze Dragon King killed him again. However, Shifeng refused to give up. Instead, he continued to try different methods of buying time and retaliated against the Dragon King. 10 times. 30 times. 100 times. The Bronze Dragon King killed Shifeng, again and again. Without knowing how much time had passed, Shifeng immersed himself in the battle, focusing on nothing but fighting. Through these repeated battles, Shifeng was able to verify his theories and challenge his ideas. As a result, he continued to extend his survival time. Initially, he had only survived against the Dragon King for a few seconds, but now, he could last more than 20 seconds. Despite the Bronze Dragon King's ability to perfectly and effortlessly neutralize his attacks, Shifeng's fighting spirit burned brighter as he fought. He insisted on trying out more attack methods, despite numerous failures. After dying over 200 times, both Shifeng's mind and body were exhausted. His reactions were slowing, and even though he was immersed in a high-mana environment, he was still slightly pale. Eventually, the Bronze Dragon King initiated the 300th match. Advancing, the Bronze Dragon King arrived before Shifeng, launching 6 slashes that escaped the swordsman's notice. This time, however, Shifeng took a half-step back and swung Killing Ray and the Twilight Blade in cross-slash. Not only did Shifeng manage to dodge 4 of the Dragon King's attacks, but he also deflected the remaining 2 with his own swords. However, due to the extreme power of the Dragon King's attacks, Shifeng hadn't altered the greatsword's trajectory by much. As a result, one of the Dragon King's attacks grazed Shifeng's shoulder, dealing more than -100,000 damage. He blocked my attacks? Confusion flashed in the Bronze Dragon King's eyes as he stared at Shifeng. Shouldn't he be exhausted by now? How did he block them? Did he get lucky? I don't care how lucky you may be, this is the end. After Shifeng blocked the Bronze Dragon King's attacks, the boss assaulted his target more fervently. 9 extreme slashes. Chapter 2065, Domain Realm. 9 streaks of silver light cut at Shifeng. Not only were the Dragon King's 9 extreme slashes silent, but the sword lights also bloomed like flowers, creating a mesmerizing scene. When the silver flowers bloomed, the world around the Dragon King seemed to freeze. If Miracle Dragon, from Miracle, saw this, he'd be stunned. He had been trying to master the technique, but the Bronze Dragon King's execution was perfect. Not only did the Dragon King's 9 sword lights avoid all forms of perception, but their trajectories eventually converged at a single point, as well. The Bronze Dragon King had just executed a fully offensive combat technique. When the sword lights met, space around them shattered. A pitch-black spatial tear extended toward Shifeng, but despite the fact that the attack was impossible to detect, Shifeng responded, moving his feet forward and positioning Killing Ray in front of him. Then, he activated Parry, his actions simple and straightforward. From afar, it would seem as if Shifeng moved very slowly, and a spectator would see his every action. However, these slow motions actually blocked the Bronze Dragon King's 9 extreme slashes. Boom! When the Dragon Scale Greatsword collided with Killing Ray, a deafening boom echoed throughout the hall, and the resulting shockwave was so intense that it reached several hundred yards away. Due to the impact, Shifeng stumbled over a dozen yards back. After the dust settled, it revealed a deep cut in the ground at the Dragon King's feet, spreading 30 yards away from the boss. The power of the Bronze Dragon King's 9 extreme slashes was even greater than some Tier 3 skills. The Bronze Dragon King, who was responsible for this display of power, wore an astonished expression. A human actually saw through my attack. The Bronze Dragon King frowned at the horizontal cut before his feet. The angle of the cut wasn't a result of his 9 extreme slashes. It was obvious that his attack had been deflected. If Shifeng hadn't seen his attack trajectory, the human wouldn't have succeeded, he would have been sent flying. However, the Bronze Dragon King did not know that Shifeng hadn't seen his attacks in the least. Rather than self-reflection, Shifeng had forced his way through the bottleneck he had been stuck in and finally entered the domain realm. The outcome even surprised Shifeng. After such a long life-or-death battle, he was exhausted. Even his vision was blurry. He couldn't sense the Bronze Dragon King's attacks normally, much less with blurry vision. Under such extreme conditions, Shifeng had used every method he could think of to detect the Dragon King's attacks. Finally, rather than trying to predict the boss's attacks by watching his arms and body, Shifeng began to read the Dragon King's breathing and subtle movements. After repeated deaths and experiments, he finally managed to see the Bronze Dragon King's attack trajectory. So, this is the domain realm? Shifeng could not help his growing excitement as he glanced at the trembling sacred sword in his hand. He had finally risen to the realm he had never been able to touch. Perhaps it was because of his widened horizons or his changed perception of the world, but he now felt as if the world around him was utterly new. He finally understood how amazing it was to wield a domain. It was no wonder why domain realm experts were considered monsters. Now, he could predict his opponent's intentions and movements by watching the subtle changes to their bodies. It was no wonder why domain realm experts easily toyed with weaker players. However, the distant Bronze Dragon King had no intention of stopping his assault as Shifeng celebrated his successful evolution into the domain realm. The Dragon King immediately advanced and swung his dragon-scale greatsword toward Shifeng's neck. Previously, every time the Dragon King had employed such lightning-fast attacks, Shifeng had fallen in the next moment. But the swordsman wasn't as blind as he had been. Although barely, he read and predicted a fraction of the Bronze Dragon King's attacks and countered them. Dang! 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 Metallic clangs echoed throughout the hall. The battle that had been one-sided for so long had evolved into a fierce back and forth. Although Shifeng was still at a complete disadvantage, and his HP continued to fall, this fight was no longer a one-sided slaughter. Although Shifeng had entered the domain realm, he's still shocked by the Dragon King's strength. He could counter some of the boss's attacks now, yet the Dragon King didn't evade his counterattacks, receiving them head-on. As a result, the massive gap between them hadn't shortened in the slightest despite Shifeng's newfound ability to predict some of the Dragon King's attacks. Following which, Shifeng activated one skill after another. He had even activated Life Domain. In the end, however, he couldn't change the outcome as the Bronze Dragon King continued to shave away his HP. It was only a matter of time before he died, yet as luck would have it, this was his 300th attempt. If he died again, he would fail this trial. Seeing how little HP he had remaining, Shifeng couldn't help but sigh. He decided to use all of his cards and see how far he could go. Not even a full day had passed since he had begun this trial. With the small fraction of HP he clung to, he wouldn't even survive 5 more minutes, much less 2 more days. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well use this Bronze Dragon King to test his new strength. Shifeng used the Twilight Blade's 2 active skills, Twilight's Shadow and Twilight of the Gods. The Twilight domain dominated everything within 100 yards of Shifeng. Suddenly, he split into 8 copies of himself, each with 75% of the main body's basic attributes. Each copy then claimed a Twilight Blade, and their basic attributes soared to 85% of the original form. Although Shifeng had sacrificed some of his basic attributes to activate Twilight of the Gods, he had turned the 1-on-1 fight into an 8-on-1 battle. As the Bronze Dragon King charged toward him again, Shifeng activated the Ring of Gospel's Ring of Brilliance as well. Unfortunately, Shifeng didn't have enough magic crystals on him to activate Miniature World, but due to Ring of Brilliance, his doppelgangers now had 100% of his basic attributes. Their physiques were even stronger than his main bodies. Meaningless tricks. The Bronze Dragon King sneered at Shifeng. In response, he summoned a second dragon-scale greatsword, dual-wielding the 2 massive weapons. The intensity of his aura also skyrocketed. He still reserved some of his strength? Shifeng tensed as he felt the Bronze Dragon King's aura grow. "It's over, human," the Bronze Dragon King growled, transforming into a streak of light as he moved toward Shifeng. His movement speed was significantly higher than it had been, which made his movements more difficult to read. Divine Flash. Not one to fall behind, Shifeng surrounded the Dragon King with all 8 of his clones and executed Sword's transmigration simultaneously. However, as he exchanged blows with the Bronze Dragon King, Shifeng's vision abruptly darkened, and he fell forward. The Dragon King stood before Shifeng proudly, his expression as indifferent and arrogant as it had always been. The Dragon King had known that this trial was impossible for any mortal since the very beginning. However, just as the Bronze Dragon King was about to return to the magic barrier, he halted, frozen in place. Looking down, he discovered a faint, white mark on his arm. He had actually lost 1 HP. "He injured me?" Shock brightened the Bronze Dragon King's eyes as he stared at the mark on his arm. Hence, we need a representative to handle these matters, Vatra said. I wish to appoint you as my representative in removing the undead from the continent of God's domain. System, you have accepted the hidden quest, Undead World. Quest content, you must annihilate the undead hiding and causing chaos on the God's domain continent. Rewards unknown. Of course, you cannot complete the task with your current strength. Hence, I have prepared 2 items for you. The first is the dragon summoning flute I've carefully handcrafted. The second item is this stone. These 2 items will help you deal with the undead that have snuck into God's domain. After saying so, Vatra revealed a shining horn and simple black stone, handing them to Shurfeng. Dragon summoning flute, replica, legendary rank item. A horn rumored to summon a flock of dragons. Spend 3,000 advanced magic cores to summon 5 dragons to assist in battle for 3 hours. Cooldown, 15 days. The dragons summoned can only fight NPCs. They cannot fight players or monsters. A legendary item? Shurfeng was stunned into silence as he examined the dragon summoning flute. He had to admit that a legendary item was awe-inspiring. The dragon summoning flute could actually summon 5 dragons. If only he could use it during his own battles, it would be a truly incredible item. However, the cost to use the flute was painfully high. Advanced magic cores could only be obtained from high-ranked bosses. Moreover, advanced magic cores had a large variety of uses. Not only could they be used as a component when crafting master potions, epic weapons, and epic equipment, but they were also necessary for building many types of constructions. At this stage of the game, even first-rate guilds would be fortunate if they had 2,000 advanced magic cores, yet the dragon summoning flute required 3,000 for each use. No ordinary guild could afford such an expenditure. After inspecting the dragon summoning flute, Shurfeng shifted his attention to the black stone in his other hand. Mysterious stone, consumable. From the outside, it looks just like a simple stone. However, this stone contains a strand of a god's power. It has a chance of granting players self-awakening. This stone may be used up to 33 times. Self-awakening? Is this stone that amazing? Shurfeng was still speechless after reading the black stone's introduction. Self-awakening might be a foreign concept to current players, but Shurfeng was quite familiar with the idea. Self-awakening could allow players to master a combat technique forcibly. Of course, learning a combat technique so brutally had a downside. Players would consume far more stamina when using the technique they learned through self-awakening. However, this method also had its benefits. Self-awakening would allow players to experience what it felt like to use the full technique and master it, which would, in turn, lower the technique's stamina consumption. This process was far more effective than watching a video or experiencing the technique in a different way. As Shurfeng began to research the black stone, Archangel Vatra waved a hand. Suddenly, Shurfeng felt the system transport him out of the hall as he returned to the space-time tunnel. Chapter 2067, New White River City. Star Moon Kingdom, White River City. When Shurfeng returned to White River City, he discovered that the city had undergone massive changes while he had been gone. He had only been away for 2 weeks or so, yet experts from well-known adventurer teams now crowded the streets. Even the weakest among these experts was level 63, Tier 2, and they all wore level 60 secret silver equipment. It almost seemed as if such equipment had become widely available, something so common that it wasn't worth players' attention. Bronze mounts were also a common sight in the city now. Occasionally, Shurfeng even noticed players atop mysterious iron mounts. White River City had become almost as prosperous as an empire's imperial capital. Shurfeng had very nearly failed to recognize the city due to these massive changes. Moreover, Star Moon Kingdom's guards used to protect the city, but now, guards from other nations patrolled its streets. Shurfeng even spotted players from multiple foreign first-rate guilds as he walked through the city, including a few peak experts from these guilds. Shurfeng wasn't the only player to notice these experts. Players who visited White River City for the first time were just as shocked. Amazing. Isn't that player wearing the Dawn Light set for Berserkers? Look at that elementalist. He's wearing the level 60 fine gold ranked Wind Spirit set. I've heard that the set only drops from level 60, 100-man Hell Mode team dungeons. So, this is White River City? Isn't the equipment these players are wearing here a little too amazing? I have only seen a handful of people with level 60 fine gold set equipment in the Black Dragon Empire's Black Dragon City. How are there so many people with that kind of equipment here? The players visiting White River City for the first time couldn't help but asp when they saw the well-equipped experts wandering the city, but the original residents merely spared these experts an indifferent glance. White River City had been developing too quickly, practically every day, and this was no longer an unusual sight. The city's rapid changes were all due to the auction arena system's activation. As the only NPC city in Starmoon Kingdom and the neighboring kingdoms to have the auction arena system, White River City had instantly become the heart of these kingdoms. The various major powers swarmed to the city in an attempt to compete for control of it. Hence, the quantity and quality of the experts here had skyrocketed. The auction arena system also provided a development opportunity for merchant and independent players, who had come running to the city, as well. As a result, White River City had grown into a large-scale NPC city with a player population exceeding 20 million. It also had more powers than any other NPC city in Starmoon Kingdom and its several neighbors. As for weapons and equipment, even the level 60 secret silver rank, which was rare in other cities, was almost a standard in White River City. Many experts even wore level 60 fine gold equipment. At this point, only level 60 dark gold equipment could draw attention in White River City. Unlike White River City's newest players, the city's original residents paid no attention to the wandering experts and their equipment as they rested and chatted by the roadside. Instead, they were focused on their discussions over the fight for White River City. The official struggle for White River City is going to start in 2 days. Independent players like us will get to enjoy a good show. I've heard that there are already 4 superpowers fighting for supremacy. I wonder how Zero Wing will hold its position. If Zero Wing loses White River City, all of its investments in the city will go to waste. Why are we even talking about this? Zero Wing can't hold the city. One of those superpowers will take it in the end. The auction arena's competition isn't like field combat. Players can't rely on tools in the auction arena. Participants will have to rely on powerful experts and resources to win it. Zero Wing is much weaker than a superpower in this regard, especially when it comes to the number of peak experts it has. Zero Wing has no chance against the participating superpowers. I guess you're right. If Zero Wing had another 6 months, it might have enough resources and experts to contend with superpowers. Although she had broken away from her family's influence to develop independently, if Twilight Echo perished, so would Aqua Rose's family. Naturally, she couldn't just sit by and watch. However, Nature Hall was not the first-rate guild it had been in the past. It had secured major corporations' investments and not long ago, had successfully removed a super first-rate guild from the Storm Empire. Since it had a long time to develop after that incident, it was easy to imagine how powerful Nature Hall had become. Chapter 2068, Zero Wing's Protection. Storm Empire, Nether Mine. The Storm Empire was located in a mountainous region, and various ore veins were common around the empire. As a result, the empire had become famous as an ore producer on the God's Domain continent. Meanwhile, the empire possessed the Nether Mine on one of its borders, which bathed in nether energy all year round. Because nether energy increased players' stamina consumption several-fold, and the mountains around the mine were home to level 70 and above demonic beasts, players were rarely interested in grinding and leveling in the area. However, several thousand players had gathered near one of the creeks between the two mountains. The lowest leveled of these players was level 62, and all of them would be considered experts. Only, these several thousand experts were members of 2 groups, one with fewer than 400 players, and the other with nearly 3,000. If the Storm Empire's players were present, they'd be shocked. The smaller group consisted of Twilight Echo's core members, the pillars that supported the guild. Roughly 30 of them were top-ranked experts in the Storm Empire, and to ordinary players, they were unreachable. The strongest of these experts had to be Dark Wave, Twilight Echo's current guild leader and a player that ranked among the top 10 within his class. Many powers operated in the Storm Empire, and its player population was even more frightening. Ranking among the top 10 on one's class ranking list was an impressive feat. Dark Wave could easily rank among the top 20 or 30 in any kingdom's overall combat power ranking. Such a group of experts shouldn't even fear an army of 10,000 elite players, but despite facing a legion of less than 3,000, Twilight Echo's core members wore grim expressions. Their eyes even held traces of fear. To think Nature Hall would send even you, Vice Guild Leader Owl, to greet us. Your guild must think highly of us, Dark Wave commented to the robust, bear-like man carrying 2 epic ranked one-handed axes, fear flashing in his eyes. Owllife had only been an ordinary expert, but after joining God's domain, he had repeatedly challenged the game's experts, growing stronger at a ridiculous rate. In the end, he had grown from an unknown player into one of the Storm Empire's famous experts. He then caught Nature Hall's attention, and the guild recruited him. After joining Nature Hall, Owllife's development speed skyrocketed, and he quickly became one of the guild's capable generals. When the super first-rate guild, 9-Star Family had operated in the Storm Empire, Owllife had fought and defeated an army of its peak experts. He had even single-handedly killed 5 peak experts while leading a 5,000-man team to capture one of the super first-rate guild's towns. That battle had shaken the Empire and made Owllife famous. Eventually, Owllife had become one of Nature Hall's vice guild leaders. Although Dark Wave ranked among the top 10 in his own class within the Empire, Owllife ranked among the top 10 in the overall rankings. While the difference might not seem major, it was like the difference between a candle flame and a roaring bonfire. If Owllife wanted to, he could kill every Twilight Echo expert present. Guild leader Dark Wave, I assume you know Nature Hall's stance on this since I've made the trip here. You people from Twilight Echo should stop deluding yourselves, Owllife said with a commanding tone, smiling at Dark Wave. Twilight Echo has already conceded every high-resource location available. We have even moved to this remote map to grind. We already intend to give up on developing in the Storm Empire. What more do you people want? Dark Wave said as he tightened his grip on his saber, his expression darkening in frustration. The guild leader sent me to knock some sense into you, Owllife said, chuckling. Guild leader, why don't we just fight them? That's right. If we have to go down, we'll take them with us. Twilight Echo's experts prepared themselves for a desperate battle in response to Nature Hall's determination to drive them into a corner. You want to suffer mutual destruction? Do you really think that you're capable of that? Owllife could not help but laugh when he heard Twilight Echo's members. Owllife's words incensed Twilight Echo's members further. Only Dark Wave remained silent. He had nothing to offer in rebuttal. His silence wasn't due to a lack of courage, but because Owllife spoke the truth. No one in the guild had a better idea than he of how powerful the players who ranked among the top 10 on the Empire's overall combat power rankings were. It was no exaggeration to consider these players humanoid monsters. We don't have any other choice. Once the battle begins, I'll try to pin down Owllife for as long as I can. Everyone else, split up and run. Dark Wave said. He then turned to Aqua Rose, who stood beside him, and said, Aqua, you've seen it for yourself now. Your return can't solve this matter. You need to try to escape this. Don't let Twilight Echo ruin your future. As Aqua Rose's fourth uncle, he was grateful that his niece had returned to help the family's guild. Unfortunately, she couldn't change anything. After seeing how Nature Hall treated Twilight Echo, he knew that if any other superpower interfered, Nature Hall would make his guild suffer for it. Dark Wave knew that Zero Wing, Aqua Rose's guild, had been developing quite well recently and was now better off than Twilight Echo. Helping Twilight Echo wasn't worth Aqua Rose losing her opportunity in Zero Wing. Aqua Rose bowed her head and gritted her teeth in frustration. She had never expected Nature Hall to be so intent on cornering Twilight Echo. If she hadn't returned most of her weapons and equipment to Zero Wing's guild warehouse before leaving, she might have been able to fight Owl Life and allow more of Twilight Echo's members to escape. You want to flee? Are you even strong enough for that? Owl Life ridiculed, sneering at the serious expressions on Twilight Echo's members. However, just before a fight broke out, 1,000 players ran into the valley. An elegant girl in beautiful mage robes, looking like a fairy, led the force, and many of the players in the valley couldn't help but stare. Among the 1,000 new arrivals, the lowest leveled player was 63, while most were level 64. The weakest piece of equipment these players wore was level 60 secret silver rank. Many of these players even wore level 60 fine gold and dark gold equipment. Both Nature Hall and Twilight Echo's members watched these newcomers with envy. However, the most noticeable aspect of these players was their sharp auras. They clearly weren't ordinary experts. Who are you? Can't you see that Nature Hall is busy here? If you don't want any trouble, leave immediately. Owl Life warned the approaching 1,000-man legion. Normally, he would have already commanded his subordinates to eliminate any intruders, but this 1,000-man legion clearly wasn't a normal force. Even his players would suffer if they attacked these new arrivals without care. Us? We're from Zero Wing, Violet Cloud said with a faint smile. Zero Wing? Isn't that a guild from Starmoon Kingdom? Owl Life faintly recalled such a guild, and from what he could remember, Zero Wing had been developing excellently recently. He then asked, "Why have you come here?" "We have orders from our guild leader to inform Nature Hall that Twilight Echo is under Zero Wing's protection," Violet Cloud calmly replied. Chapter 2069, Defeating Nature Hall in 2 moves. Zero Wing wants to protect Twilight Echo? Nature Hall's members were stunned when they heard Violet Cloud's announcement. Twilight Echo's members were just as dumbfounded. Nature Hall was akin to the Storm Empire's emperor. It had already grown powerful enough to demand respect from super guilds, yet Zero Wing, which was barely on par with a first-rate guild, intended to oppose Nature Hall. The guild leader plans to interfere? When Aqua Rose saw the 1,000-man legion from Zero Wing, excitement and worry flashed in her eyes. She hadn't had a specific understanding of Nature Hall before her return to the Storm Empire, but it wasn't long before she realized that Nature Hall shouldn't be provoked. Nature Hall's foundations were beyond her imagination. The guild already had more than 100 peak experts and tens of thousands of expert members. With so many experts, Nature Hall's rule in the Storm Empire was unshakable. How arrogant! This is Nature Hall's territory. Do you think that a few words will protect Twilight Echo? Owl Life roared in anger. Not even your ally, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, would dare to act so pompously before Nature Hall. Vice Guild Leader, what's the point of wasting words on them? Since these ignorant players dare to act so insolently before our guild, we should get rid of them, here and now. That's right. Let's teach these country bumpkins the difference between a kingdom's overlord and an empire's. We'll show them how little they matter in the Storm Empire. Nature Hall's members voiced their outrage over Violet Cloud's declaration, even offering to teach Zero Wing's members a lesson. We are only here to give you notice. Your reply is irrelevant, Violet Cloud calmly responded. If you don't have any more questions, we'll be escorting Twilight Echo's members away now. The valley fell silent when Violet Cloud finished speaking. Even Dark Wave, Twilight Echo's guild leader, could not help but gasp at the girl's comment. He could not understand just what gave Zero Wing the confidence to provoke the Storm Empire's emperor. This is bad. Anxiously, Dark Wave turned to look in Aqua Rose and said, "Aqua, you need to stop them. If this gets out of hand, Zero Wing will be doomed." Aqua Rose nodded, but although she wanted to contact Violet Cloud, Owl Life didn't give her the chance to do so. Bastards. Everyone, heed my command and eliminate these lowlifes. Owl Life snarled as he pointed at Violet Cloud. The chilling gaze he aimed at the young woman even caused the experts around him to shudder. A little over half of Nature Hall's forces split away from surrounding Twilight Echo's team and charged at Zero Wings 1000 man team, their battle cries echoing throughout the valley. Nature Hall's members moved like well-trained soldiers. Not only were they fast, but they were perfectly in sync with each other. 18 shield warriors and guardian knights moved to the forefront, radiating a silver glow as divine runes covered their bodies. They all had more than 200,000 HP, and their auras resembled that of ancient war gods. So strong. Twilight Echo's members lost their composure when they saw this. Every member of Twilight Echo's team was an expert. They could easily gauge an opponent's strength based on their aura. The 18 MTs radiated an intensely dangerous feeling, and Twilight Echo's members knew that in a one-on-one, these MTs would blow them away. Not even their guild leader, Dark Wave, could necessarily stop these MTs' assault, even with an active life-saving skill. So, this is Nature Hall's Silverlight battle array? Dark Wave could not help but gasp when he saw the MT's silver glow. The Silverlight battle array was well known in the Storm Empire. Nature Hall had relied on this battle array to defeat its first-rate guild when it had still been weaker than 9-star family. He had only ever witnessed the Silverlight battle array in videos before, and now that he got to see it in person, the increased strength, HP, and speed were beyond his expectations. It was no wonder why Nature Hall didn't fear other superpowers. Nobody can stop our guild's Silverlight battle array. Let's tear apart these Zero-Wing players. The Nature Hall players that still surrounded Twilight Echo's members laughed as their companions activated the battle array. The Silverlight battle array allowed 18 players to link together. Not only could they share the incoming damage, but their strength, HPs, movement speed, and attack speed increased by 30% as well. Most importantly, they could share their senses through the battle array. However, before the 18 MTs reached Zero Wing's team and tore apart its defensive line, Violet Cloud, who stood among her players, waved her staff. Dimensional fracture. Space tore before Violet Cloud, rapidly extending toward Nature Hall's members. Although the spatial tear looked fine and weak, it felt like the roar of an ancient behemoth. The sky and the earth trembled at its might. Dodge it! Owl Life shouted, panicking. Unfortunately, the spatial tear grew too quickly for his warning to be of any use. Crack! The sound of shattering glass shook the valley as the spatial tear reached Nature Hall's MTs, who failed to react in time. Like a hot knife through butter, the spatial tear cut through the 18 MTs, their bisected forms falling to the ground. Nature Hall's rear-line healers had no time to cast a healing spell before their MTs lost the last of their HPs. Moreover, the spatial tear didn't stop with the 18 linked MTs, reaping the lives of players standing dozens of yards away. Do you still wish to fight us? Violet Cloud asked as she retracted her staff and gazed upon Nature Hall's members. With just one move, Violet Cloud had killed over 200 experts. Her indifferent tone suggested that she didn't consider the act significant, and Nature Hall survivors shuddered in fear. You merely have a powerful spell. Do you really think that none of us can take you down? Rage flared in Owl Life's eyes as he glared at Violet Cloud. While he didn't particularly mind the deaths of 200-plus guild experts, he minded losing the 18 MTs that could utilize the Silverlight battle array. The guild had carefully nurtured all of those players, and every one of them was very close to reaching the refinement realm. With the Silverlight battle array, each of those players had the combat power to surpass ordinary refinement realm experts. Losing a level might not impact their progress overmuch, but the loss of their weapons and equipment definitely would. They would need a lot of time to recover the items. Owl Life's body transformed into a blur as he dashed toward Violet Cloud like a vicious gale. Crap! Owl Life is attacking. Dark waves darkened as he watched Owl Life make his move. Owl Life wasn't like the 18 MTs that had died. With his weapons, equipment, and combat standards, he ranked at the very top of the Storm Empire. His 2 one-handed axes were even epic set weapons. He could easily repel a great lord of the same level, and the valley's narrow terrain gave him the perfect battlefield. If Owl Life reached Zero Wing's team, disaster would ensue. In less than 10 seconds, Owl Life arrived before Zero Wing's members. Although Zero Wing's ranged experts bombarded him with attacks, he effortlessly dodged or blocked the incoming spells and arrows. None of the attacks managed to reach him. As they watched, Nature Hall's players felt their blood boil with excitement. Ha ha ha. The Vice Guild leader is finally making a move. Zero Wing's members are dead for sure. However, as Nature Hall's members expected to see Owl Life throw Zero Wing's members into the air, Violet Cloud moved again. Like her previous attack, she lightly waved Death's Sigh and manifested multiple magic arrays around her. Are you kidding me? Both Nature Hall and Twilight Echo's members were stunned. Violet Cloud had called forth 200 magic arrays, a blade of darkness forming before each array. Go! Violet Cloud shouted. Like raindrops, these 200 blades of darkness descended on Owl Life, all under Violet Cloud's control. They were not magical projectiles that could only move in a straight line. Burial Flower. Even Owl Life frowned as he watched the 200 blades of darkness fly toward him like lively sprites. He immediately activated his Epic Axe's active skill, and a gigantic flower formed beneath his feet. 12 flower petals circled Owl Life, each carrying 100% of his strength. The petals acted like MT's shields. Chapter 2070, Powerful Zero Wing, he died? Owl Life's been killed in one move? Nature Hall and Twilight Echo's members gaped in shock after witnessing Owl Life's death, unable to believe their eyes. However, not only did the man's corpse lie before them, but his trademark weapons, the burial axes, rested next to his body. Aqua, your guild's experts are quite strong. Is that girl your guild's #1 expert? Dark Wave asked his niece, his eyes glued on Violet Cloud. He had known that Zero Wing had been developing impressively, but he hadn't thought it had become this strong. Violet Cloud's gaze remained indifferent even after killing Owl Life, as if she had casually slain a common monster she had randomly come across. Someone actually treated Owl Life, one of Nature Hall's Vice Guild leaders, like a common monster, killing him as if swatting a fly. If news of this spread, it would shake the very core of the Storm Empire. No, Violet doesn't rank #1 in the guild, but she should stand among the top 5. Only, Aqua Rose stopped herself, watching Violet Cloud in confusion. She was very familiar with Violet Cloud's standards. Like her, the girl was a refinement realm expert. However, Violet had achieved more in the refinement realm than she had. Although, if it came down to a fight, and their levels and equipment were equal, she could fight Violet Cloud to a standstill with her Sea God's legacy. If the battle happened at sea, she'd win by a landslide. If Aqua Rose had to fight a peak expert like Owl Life, even with all of her epic equipment, she'd have a very hard time defeating him. As for killing Owl Life in one move, she simply wasn't capable of the feat. The equipment that the various large guilds' peak experts improved as time passed, yet for some reason, Violet Cloud had killed Owl Life instantly. Moreover, she had accomplished the feat effortlessly. No matter how Aqua Rose considered the situation, she couldn't figure how Violet Cloud had done it. However, Aqua Rose didn't know that Sherfong had given Violet Cloud the elemental bloodline after his return from the ancient god's maze, and due to the advanced bloodline, Violet Cloud's basic attributes had skyrocketed. With her massive basic attribute advantage, it was only natural that she had slain Owl Life like a common monster. She's only in the top 5 with that kind of strength? Dark Wave stared at his niece in shock. He no longer dared to imagine how powerful Zero Wing truly was. Nature Hall likely had less than a handful of experts that could kill Owl Life instantly, yet a non-superpower like Zero Wing had 4 more of these experts. Meanwhile, Nature Hall's members panicked after watching Owl Life die. Like frightened birds, they scattered and fled from the battlefield, none of them daring to fight any of Zero Wing's members. What a joke. Both Owl Life and the 18 Silverlight Battle Array MTs had been defeated in a single move each. They weren't fools. Now that they knew they were no match for Zero Wing, they wouldn't stay and fight. Doing so would be nothing more than suicide. Once Nature Hall's members fled, Violet Cloud turned her attention away and approached Aqua Rose. "Big Sis Aqua, here are the items you stored in the guild warehouse," Violet Cloud told Aqua Rose, who wore a hesitant expression. After trading the equipment, she said, "Right, guild leader asked me to tell you this, don't hold back. The guild has your back." Guild leader, for a moment, various emotions overwhelmed Aqua Rose. When Twilight Echo's members heard Violet Cloud's message for her comrade, they couldn't help their envy. A large guild like Zero Wing was actually willing to start an all-out war with a superpower to support one of its guild members. They had never even dared to imagine such a thing in the virtual gaming world. If they could join such a wonderful guild, what more could they possibly ask for? Once Aqua Rose regained her composure and re-equipped her weapons and equipment, her change stupefied Twilight Echo's members. She had already felt incredibly powerful, but after replacing her weapons and equipment, she felt like a butterfly breaking out of its cocoon. Not only did she look beautiful, but she also radiated an intensely powerful aura. Although they couldn't tell the quality of her items since she had hidden the glow effects, her aura was even stronger than Dark Wave and Owl Life's. "So, this is the guild Aqua joined?" Dark Wave's shock was even greater than when he had watched Owl Life die. The fact that Violet Cloud had killed Owl Life made it clear that Zero Wing had its own capable experts, but the equipment that had instantly elevated Aqua Rose's combat power, which could now rival Owl Life's, had an entirely different meaning. "Let's leave this place and return to Windy City. Now that we've killed one of Nature Hall's vice guild leaders, Nature Hall won't let this matter rest," Aqua Rose said as she glanced at Owl Life's corpse. A vice guild leader was one of a guild's public faces. If they did not handle this incident's aftermath properly, Twilight Echo would have a difficult time leaving the Storm Empire. "Rest assured, Big Sis Aqua. The guild leader has led a group to Storm City to discuss the situation with Nature Hall. I believe he will settle this matter very quickly," Violet Cloud said, giggling. "What? They went to meet Nature Hall?" Dark Wave nearly jumped up in shock. "Are they tired of living?" Although Owl Life was only Nature Hall's 8th Vice Guild leader, one of the lowest-ranked Vice Guild leaders in the guild, he was still a Vice Guild leader, yet as Violet Cloud had killed the man, Zero Wing had been heading to Nature Hall for negotiations. Zero Wing was clearly trying to provoke Nature Hall. Zero Wing would likely have trouble getting out of this unscathed, much less negotiate a better situation for Twilight Echo. Meanwhile, in the Storm Empire's Storm City, Shifeng's party of 6 had arrived before Nature Hall's residence. As the Storm Empire's imperial capital, Storm City's player population even surpassed Black Dragon City's. Storm City had nearly 27 million resident players, and its businesses were particularly prosperous. The city's prosperity was due to the Storm Empire's ores. Plenty of ores and gemstones, which other kingdoms and empires severely lacked, were produced within the empire's borders every day. Because of this production, a large number of foreign players visited the empire to trade and purchase items. Moreover, due to the abundance of ores, the Storm Empire's forging industry was exceedingly well developed. Shops that specialized in selling and crafting weapons and equipment could be found all over the city, and plenty of players wore the advanced forger's insignia. Intermediate forgers were a dime a dozen, as well. Not even White River City could say the same. Moreover, as many as 8 known master forgers also called the Storm Empire home. Among them, 2 were independent players. No other empire could dream of achieving the same at this stage of the game. Purely in terms of weapon and equipment production, Storm City far surpassed White River City. "Please notify the guild leader Nature that Star Moon Kingdom's Zero Wing has come to discuss something with him," Shifeng said as he approached the Nature Hall member stationed by the residence's entrance. "All right, but I can't guarantee that our guild leader will meet with you," the player replied, disdainfully eyeing Shifeng's party. Normally, a large number of guild representatives visited the residence to meet with Nature Hall's guild leader, including representatives from the Storm Empire's first-rate guilds. Even so, their guild leader usually ignored their requests. As for a guild from a kingdom, even the vice-guild leaders would likely refuse the request. The Nature Hall member then left to report the matter to his superior. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man sat behind an office desk, flipping through the documents in his hand, in the guild leader's office within Nature Hall's residence. Several level 64 players stood beside this man, all of which were experts with multiple pieces of epic equipment. Any ordinary expert would feel as if they stood in a cage of bloodthirsty beasts if they stood before this group. Suddenly, a player entered the room, and upon seeing the players beside the middle-aged man, he couldn't help but shudder. However, he suppressed the fear in his heart and announced, "Guild leader, there's a group of representatives from Zero Wing asking to meet with you. They're a guild from Starmoon Kingdom." A guild from Starmoon Kingdom? Nature Manifestation raised his head as he listened to the subordinate's report, curiosity flashing in his eyes. "Can't you see that the guild leader is busy? It's just a guild from a small kingdom. Send them back to their countryside," a robust man shouted. However, as the subordinate began to turn and leave, the icy-cold goddess sitting beside Nature Manifestation received a message. As she read the message, her expression darkened. "Wait," the woman shouted. "Qilin? What's wrong?" the robust man, who carried a gigantic scale shield, asked. "I've just received news that Owl Life has been killed," the woman, Jade Qilin, softly replied. "That brat got done in? Who did it? Was it Dark Wave? That shouldn't be possible." The robust man was astonished. However, after recalling Twilight Echo's experts, he doubted that any of them could kill Owl Life. No. According to the reports, he was slain by an expert from Zero Wing, Jade Qilin said. Furthermore, players had crafted these MT's equipment, which meant that Nature Hall was fully capable of crafting more. Nature Hall's foundations were extraordinary. "I've heard that Zero Wing has something to discuss with me. May I know what you wish to discuss?" Nature Manifestation watched Shifeng's party enter the room through narrowed eyes. In a deep tone, he continued, "If this is about Vice Guild Leader Owl Life, you may return to your kingdom. I am not interested in listening to your reasoning." As soon as Nature Manifestation was done speaking, the intensity of the 20 silver-armored MT's auras skyrocketed, rapidly decreasing the temperature in the room. Jade Qilin and Nature Hall's other upper echelons revealed sneers and pitying expressions. Nature Manifestation typically let them handle matters related to guilds from small kingdoms, considering the matters beneath him. However, he had insisted on meeting Zero Wing's representatives in person. They had been curious about his sudden change of heart. Now, they understood. Owl Life's death had enraged Nature Manifestation, so he wanted to speak with the culprits personally. It had been a long time since they had seen Nature Manifestation so angry. The last time he had been this furious, he had removed 3 guilds from God's domain permanently. Those guilds hadn't been small, but first- and second-rate guilds. Since this guild had dared to enrage Nature Manifestation, Zero Wing would suffer a tragic ending. Even if Zero Wing regretted killing Owl Life and wished to make amends, it was too late to change its fate. Once he was angry, no one could stop Nature Manifestation. Not even 9-Star Family had succeeded in this regard. Explanation? What explanation? Shifeng simply shrugged in response to Nature Manifestation's chilling gaze. What? After all you have done, are you seriously trying to deny your crime? Jade Qilin said, sneering at Shifeng's leisurely expression. Deny? Deny what? Shifeng turned toward Jade Qilin, frowning slightly. Is there even a need to say it? You are responsible for killing our vice guild leader Owl Life in the Nether Mine. Jade Qilin hissed, her expression becoming even colder. Oh, that's what you're talking about? Shifeng asked as realization lit his features. Calmly, he continued, that's right, we did that. You. Shifeng's relaxed reply stunned Jade Qilin. She had assumed that he'd try to deny the fact. She certainly hadn't expected him to admit it so boldly. It's good that you acknowledge it. What do you have to say for yourselves? Everyone in the room from Nature Hill, including the 20 MTs, Evil Tooth, and the others who stood beside Jade Qilin, radiated dense killing intent. Their expressions made it clear that they were prepared to slaughter these visitors if Shifeng said the wrong thing. What's there to talk about? Could Violet fail to kill this vice guild leader, Owl Life? Shifeng asked in a strange tone. The hall fell silent as every player from Nature Hall glared at Shifeng as if they were about to devour him alive. Arrogance. They had never seen such arrogance. Shifeng simply didn't know how to spell the word death. After a short moment, Shifeng returned his gaze to Nature Manifestation, calmly stating, "We are merely here to tell you one thing. Twilight Echo, which your guild has targeted, is now under Zero Wing's protection." Chapter 2072, Repelling the Enemy with One Move. For a time, Nature Hall's members in the room were stunned into silence. They had no idea of how to respond to Shifeng's declaration. Not only had Zero Wing dared to kill one of their vice guild leaders, but the guild's representatives had also come to Nature Hall's residence as if the death was of little significance. This swordsman acted as if Zero Wing had killed an ant on the roadside, not a vice guild leader. They couldn't help but marvel at Zero Wing's bravery. Now, Zero Wing even announced its protection of Twilight Echo, Nature Hall's latest target. This wasn't bravery. Zero Wing simply had a few loose screws. Not even superpowers would display such arrogance before Nature Hall. Jade Qilin even wondered if Shifeng knew anything about God's domain. Perhaps he had decided that, since his guild was doomed and would be removed from the game, he might as well provoke Nature Hall on its doorstep. Ha ha ha. Good. Very good. It's been too long since our guild has done anything outside of the Empire. To think a small kingdom's guild dares to act so pompously before us. Evil Spirit revealed a grin as he stared coldly at Shifeng, anger tainting his smile. After chasing 9-star family out of the Storm Empire, the Empire hadn't had any powers that dared to provoke Nature Hall. To secure its control in the Empire and concentrate the guild's resources, Nature Hall hadn't extended its influence past its borders. Hence, the outside world was unaware of Nature Hall's power. There was also the fact that Shifeng and the others had a few screws loose. Evil Spirit assumed that Zero Wing's members had spent too long in their own kingdom and didn't see the difference between the Storm Empire and Starmoon Kingdom, thinking that they could walk through the Empire unhindered. Nature Manifestation's personal security team stared at Zero Wing's members as if they were dead men walking. He's infuriated, Boss Spirit. That guy is definitely dead. I bet these people won't get to leave Storm City alive. This is going to be entertaining. That's right. Even if they kneel and beg for their lives, there's no saving them. They'll probably lose more than just one level. Boss Spirit will use that item, and they'll lose 3 levels with each death. If we send a tracking team after them as well, we can even send them back to level 0. Although attacking another player inside an NPC city was risky, players obtained more tools as they reached higher levels. As a result, killing other players inside NPC cities became increasingly easier. This was especially true for a superpower like Nature Hall. Even slaughtering players in an imperial capital wouldn't be a problem for the guild. This was also why the various independent experts had been more hesitant to provoke God's domain's powers. A single mistake could send them back to level 0, after all. Although the Zero Wing members present were experts and more difficult to defeat than independent experts, they were nothing to Nature Hall. Even a party of peak experts would fall in Storm City if they provoked Nature Hall, much less Shifeng's party. Nature Hall had acquired a domain treasure called Dead World from an ancient ruin. As long as a player supplied enough magic crystals, Dead World would create a domain that cut off communication with the outside world. Not even the city's NPC guards would receive a notification of the transgression if one attacked another player within the domain unless it was destroyed or released. Ordinary NPC guards wouldn't even notice the domain when standing next to it. Only the Tier 3 guard captains could see through the domain. However, how rare were Tier 3 NPC guard captains? There wasn't even one Tier 3 guard captain for 10 patrol squads in an imperial capital like Storm City. Meanwhile, each patrol squad generally monitored 3 to 5 streets. Then, I'll send someone to visit Zero Wing. In response to his guild leader's declaration, Evil Spirit revealed a stone plate and sacrificed a large number of magic crystals to it. The color in the room then faded to a dull gray. What? You want to attack us? Shifeng asked as he sent a glance at Evil Spirit, who wore pitch-black leather armor. Are you afraid now? Evil Spirit asked as he shot Shifeng a playful look. Unfortunately, it is too late for regret. He had thought that nature manifestation would wait until Shifeng's group left the residence before sending him to take action. He hadn't expected his guild leader to order an attack now. It was clear how truly furious nature manifestation was. However, he didn't think the reaction was unreasonable. Zero Wing's representatives were insufferably foolish. Even the King of Hell would laugh at their lunacy and imprison them for a few extra millennia. Afraid? Shifeng shook his head. You're not strong enough for me to fear. Crap. This is the first time I've met someone so stubborn. Everyone, attack. Kill him. Evil Spirit commanded, his eyes twitching in anger. The 20 silver-armored MTs surged toward Shifeng and his companions. Seeing this, Jade Qilin could not help but watch with a pitying gaze. Zero Wing's members might have made it out of Storm City alive, but now, not only had they lost that hope, but they would pay an even greater price. Although she did not know what gave Zero Wing's members so much confidence, she was certain that they'd die in this room. Moreover, players who died in the dead world wouldn't lose a single level, but 3. At their level, leveling up required a lot of time and effort. Losing 3 levels would be a huge setback. Nature Manifestation's 20 personal bodyguards were more than enough to eliminate Shifeng's party, not to mention the guild's peak experts like herself. Not only were these bodyguards Refinement Realm experts, but they also wielded the Silverlight Battle Array. When they activated the Battle Array, they could even kill peak experts. This was why Nature Manifestation's security team only had 20 players. As Jade Qilin and the other peak experts expected their guild leader's bodyguards to annihilate Shifeng's party, several sword lights flashed in the room. Shadow Blade. As if every sword light had a life of its own, they agilely maneuvered through the bodyguards' defenses, striking the players directly. As if some colossal beast had slammed into them, a dozen or so bodyguards flew into the walls behind them, which cracked under the immense force. In the face of death, Blackwater, Starlink, and Miracle's armies failed to remove Zero Wing. What do you think a few Refinement Realm experts can accomplish? Shifeng asked as he sheathed Killing Ray and sat back on the sofa. He watched Nature Hall's upper echelons calmly as if nothing had happened. Three magic arrays appeared around her, each from a different spell, yet they had appeared simultaneously and were of similar design as if they were a single spell. A threefold, large-scale spell? Alluring Summer, who stood behind Shifeng, was surprised to see the arrays circling Jade Qilin. Double casting was an extremely difficult technique for most magical class experts, especially when casting Tier 2 spells. Needless to say, triple casting 3 Tier 2 spells was even more difficult. However, there were certain spells in God's domain that could only be used when casting multiple spells. Generally, these were large-scale spells that required multiple players to cast, yet Jade Qilin could cast one that typically needed 3 players by herself. These large-scale spells were far more powerful than individual spells of the same tier. The instant Jade Qilin's spells took effect, 5 golden chains appeared around her, each containing soul-shuddering power. Not even Grand Lords of the same level would dare to touch these chains. As if they had a life of their own, these chains launched at Shifeng like anacondas. Let's see how he blocks this. The Nature Hall members sneered at Shifeng as they watched. Tier 2 large-scale spell, Holy Chains. This was Jade Qilin's ultimate spell. Although it had a very long cast time and wasn't suited for one-on-one combat, it would exhibit tremendous power once cast. Jade Qilin had killed multiple peak experts with this move, earning the nickname Chain Killer from the Storm Empire's players. However, the expressions Nature Hall's members wore froze as they watched what happened next. Shifeng blocked the golden chains, which even Grand Lords feared, with his swords, a thunderous roar echoing throughout the room when his blades collided with the magical attack. Despite the 5 chains' exceptional strength, they couldn't reach Shifeng. He deflected every incoming attack. As Shifeng defended himself against the magical chains, Evil Tooth appeared behind him in complete silence. After revealing himself, Evil Tooth thrust a glowing, crimson dagger toward Shifeng's back. Tier 2 Taboo Skill, Blood Shadow. This single attack contained even more power than Jade Qilin's 5 chains combined. You've finally made your move. Rather than panicking in the face of this sudden and well-timed attack, Shifeng revealed a smile. Swords Transmigration. Suddenly, the Twilight Blade and Killing Ray transformed into 2 streaks of light and wrapped around the 5 holy chains. As if they were under his control, the 5 chains then flew to intercept Evil Tooth's crimson dagger, the collision throwing sparks that temporarily blinded everyone in the room. When the light faded, Nature Hall's members wore grim expressions. Evil Tooth's HP plummeted as he stared at Shifeng in horror. Although he wanted to say something, he had already lost the last of his HP. With darkening vision, Evil Tooth collapsed to the floor. Silence dominated the reception room. Nature Manifestation's personal bodyguards had worked with 2 of the guild's peak experts against 1 opponent, yet they were either dead or crippled, aside from Jade Qilin. Like an unshakable mountain, Shifeng still stood where he had stated. The death world shattered the moment Evil Tooth died, and the room returned to its original state. Chapter 2074, Another Monster Silence. Shock. Horror. Even though Dead World had been removed and the reception room had returned to its neutral state, Jade Qilin and the other Nature Hall peak experts felt stifled and overwhelmed. Even Nature Manifestation, who had observed the fight in silence, wore a gloomy expression. Who are you? Nature Manifestation asked Shifeng. Ordinary peak experts couldn't topple his personal bodyguards or Evil Tooth, the Evil Spirit Legion's commander. While he had considered the possibility of their defeat, he hadn't expected it to happen so easily. He couldn't imagine anyone, aside from Domain Realm monsters, who would be capable of such a feat. But how rare were Domain Realm experts in God's domain? Every Domain Realm expert that had ever existed in the virtual gaming world was accounted for, and they were all responsible for shaking the community to its core. However, based on his information, Shifeng's name wasn't on that list. Black Flame, Shifeng stated calmly. Black Flame? Zero Wings Guild leader? Shock colored Jade Qilin's face when she heard Shifeng's reply. But how? Black Flame wasn't unknown to Nature Hall. After all, he ranked among the top 10 on the God's Domain expert list. He was a peak expert that had reached the Void Realm, and one of the top peak experts in the game. But at the end of the day, that's all he was, a peak expert. Although they earned the various superpowers' attention, they weren't powerful enough to threaten a superpower's very existence. Every superpower had plenty of peak experts in its ranks. No matter how she looked at it, however, no peak expert should be capable of the combat power Shifeng had displayed. What an excellent scheme. So, you've deliberately hidden your strength all this time? Nature Manifestation asked. Unexpected, he was actually smiling. However, knowing their guild leader's personality, Jade Qilin and her companions knew Nature Manifestation's smile wasn't an indication of his good mood. Rather, it was a result of his anger reaching a tipping point. The various superpowers in God's domain viewed every Domain Realm expert as immensely important. Rather, these experts were impossible to ignore. Domain Realm experts were strategic weapons, and as players reached higher levels, the threat these experts posed to superpowers would grow. Hence, superpowers took considerable precautions against every Domain Realm expert they encountered. If Shifeng had revealed himself as a Domain Realm expert early on, the various superpowers would have paid more attention to Zero Wing. The guild's name would have likely joined the superpower's blacklists, regardless of its developmental state. Some superpowers might have even extinguished Zero Wing immediately to save themselves from future trouble. As for Shifeng recently reaching the domain realm, it wasn't likely. Reaching the domain realm proved that one transcended the limits of humanity. Despite the various super first-rate guilds and super guilds accumulating resources and knowledge over many generations, each superpower had, at most, nurtured only a handful of domain realm experts in each generation. It was easy to imagine how difficult reaching the domain realm truly was. In other words, Shifeng must have hidden his strength from the public deliberately to avoid attracting too much attention. Now that he was satisfied with his personal strength and that of his guild, he wanted to use Nature Hall as a stepping stone to show off his power. That would explain why Shifeng was willing to make an enemy of Nature Hall just to help Twilight Echo, a guild he was barely connected to. Guild leader, should we request senior fans' presence? Jade Qilin whispered to her guild leader. Although domain realm experts were extremely rare, Nature Hall had its own collection of them. Senior Fan was one example. A mere up-and-coming guild like Zero Wing actually dared to use Nature Hall as a stepping stone. This was unacceptable. Suddenly, the reception room's doors flew open, and a group of 50-plus silver-armored experts charged in and surrounded Shifeng's party. Although they weren't refinement realm experts like Nature Manifestation's personal bodyguards, they could rival such experts with their Silverlight battle array. What? You still insist on fighting? Shifeng asked as he calmly watched Nature Hall's members from his seat, showing no signs of anxiety or concern. He wouldn't have dared to visit Nature Hall's residence before he had reached the domain realm and acquired the Twilight Blade. This was, after all, a superpower's headquarters, and Nature Hall would have plenty of methods to deal with invaders. The guild would also have other domain realm experts nearby. At this stage of the game, Shifeng's fight against Martial Dragon on Thunder Island wasn't a proper indicator of domain realm experts' prowess. During that battle, he had had the advantage in terms of basic attributes and skills, and since Martial Dragon had only been a Tier 1 player, the man's weak physique had prevented him from fully exhibiting his strength. To put it simply, players' physiques at that time had restricted domain realm experts. Shifeng hadn't gotten a clear idea of how strong domain realm experts were in that fight, but once he had reached the same realm, he understood these experts' true power. With a Tier 1 player's physique, domain realm experts would be limited to 50% of their true combat power at most. However, Void realm experts would be able to display their full combat power. It was only natural that domain realm experts back then had only seemed slightly more powerful than peak experts. At this stage of the game, however, not only had domain realm experts' physiques greatly improved, but their weapon and equipment standards had also increased. A superpower's domain realm expert likely wore at least 3 or 4 pieces of epic equipment, possibly even a fragmented legendary item. Superpowers had frightening resources and expansive territory. Encountering a superpower that owned 1 or 2 fragmented legendary items at this stage of the game wouldn't be odd. As soon as Shifeng was done speaking, Fire Dance, Cola, Alluring Summer, Shadow Blade, and Yi Wumian, who stood behind him, stepped forward and released their auras. As if a volcano had erupted in the room, an intense energy washed over its occupants, and the expressions that Nature Hall's members wore changed instantly. Fire Dance and her comrades felt like primordial beasts that had just awoken from a long slumber. The pressure they radiated was painfully stifling, particularly Fire Dance's aura. Could she be another domain realm expert? The thought drifted through Jade Qilin and her companions' minds, shuddering at the idea. Zero Wing was merely a small kingdom's guild. It wasn't even a superpower, yet it had 2 domain realm experts. Since when were domain realm experts so common? If Shifeng could hear these peak experts' thoughts, he wouldn't have been surprised. Among the 5 players he had brought with him, only Fire Dance held a fragmented legendary weapon. She also had her own bloodline and 6 epic items. In Zero Wing, Fire Dance's equipment standards were only second to his. Moreover, she was only a step away from the Truth Realm and had already mastered multiple advanced combat techniques. In her current state, she could definitely contend with domain realm experts. Chapter 2075, Miscalculation. Although Jade Qilin and Nature Hall's other peak experts had intended to act, they couldn't help but freeze the moment they felt Fire Dance's oppressive aura. Guild leader, are we still going to fight them? Jade Qilin could not help but ask as she turned to look at Nature Manifestation, her expression hesitant. One domain realm expert was already extremely difficult to defeat. Now that Fire Dance, who felt like another domain realm expert, had joined the fray, she had to take this situation more seriously. Ordinary players might not realize the importance of one or two domain realm experts in a guild, but as one of Nature Hall's upper echelons, she was very clear of the implications. This was no longer a matter of Shifeng or Fire Dance's personal strength, but of Zero Wing's foundations. Instead, it was a matter of Zero Wing's guild foundations. If Zero Wing had only possessed a single domain realm expert, it could have been explained away as luck. It would prove nothing regarding Zero Wing's foundation. However, the fact that Zero Wing had at least two domain realm experts couldn't be shrugged off in the same way. Domain realm experts weren't as common as cabbages. If Zero Wing truly had two domain realm experts, the guild wasn't as simple as everyone assumed. Qilin, you're overthinking this. Her aura doesn't prove that she's a domain realm monster. She could simply have absurdly high basic attributes. Zero Wing has no background, so it's lucky enough to have one domain realm expert. How could it possibly have two? And such a young one at that, a solemn man with a scar across his face spoke up. Listening to the man's reasoning, Nature Hall's members relaxed, releasing more than half of their anxiety. No one doubted this man's words. He was Deep Thunder, Nature Hall's first vice-guild leader and one of the guild's main support pillars. He was also one of the top 10 experts on the God's Domain's secret experts list. The secret pavilion had two God's Domain experts lists. One recorded the top 1,000 experts with the most attention-grabbing battle records. The second was a secret list, which only superpowers could purchase. The secret experts list only contained 100 names. However, these players weren't ranked by their battle records, but based on the combat standards they had revealed. One had to be a Void Realm expert before the secret pavilion would even consider them for the list. Any peak expert that could rank on the secret experts list was, at most, a step away from the domain realm. Those that ranked among the top 10 were practically pounding against the edge of this realm. They only needed a slight push to reach the domain realm. Deep Thunder was one of these experts. Although none of Nature Hall's experts in the room had reached the domain realm yet, Deep Thunder was undoubtedly the most knowledgeable about it. Since Deep Thunder was certain that Fire Dance was not a domain realm expert, there was a 90% chance that he was correct. Thunder is right. Everyone needs to calm down. Although I don't know how this little girl from Zero Wing has such frightening basic attributes, Zero Wing is 100 years too early if it thinks it can stroll into Nature Hall's residence with such an attitude. Nature Manifestation commented, backing up Deep Thunder. He flashed Shifeng a piercing glare before commanding, summon Senior Fan and the Evil Spirit Legion members immediately. Lock down the residence. I want to see how capable these Zero Wing representatives truly are. Although Shifeng had displayed astonishing combat power, Nature Hall wasn't a pushover. Nature Hall had gone to great lengths to recruit Senior Fan and convince him to protect the guild. The Elder had been a domain realm monster for decades, and his combat standards were far above Shifeng's, who, at most, had only entered the domain realm within the past few years. They had been stunned after witnessing the combat power Shifeng's party commanded, but after giving the matter some thought, they realized that Shifeng's party would only sign their death warrants if they killed Nature Manifestation. Zero Wing was merely a kingdom's guild. Regardless of its battle records, it was still far weaker than Nature Hall. Zero Wing could not afford to endure Nature Hall's wrath at all. As a guild leader, Shifeng must have realized this. Unless Shifeng insisted on dragging Zero Wing down with him, he wouldn't let Fire Dance kill the other guild leader. Even Storm City's independent players wouldn't believe that Shifeng would do such a thing, let alone these guild upper echelons. As the smiles Nature Hall's members wore spread with delight, Shifeng, who watched from his seat, returned the grins and said, "What you say is true. There is a big difference between Zero Wing and Nature Hall, but what if Nature Hall lost Storm City?" Lost Storm City? Is this fellow dreaming? What a joke. How could our guild possibly lose Storm City? Nature Hall's members began to laugh, thinking Shifeng had gone mad. Storm City was Nature Hall's main headquarters. Not even a superpower could dethrone the guild in its own city, much less Zero Wing. You're referring to the auction arena battle, right? Nature Manifestation laughed. While I understand your thinking, that is a battle of experts and resources. Zero Wing's experts might be impressive, but do you really think Zero Wing can outmatch Nature Hall's resources? Superpowers like Nature Hall had long since investigated the auction arena's rules. In this competition, resources were far more important than military might, hence, all of the various superpowers fervently collected epic materials while they had time before the auction arena competition began. Compared to Nature Hall, Zero Wing's material collection speed was useless. How could Zero Wing possibly hope to defeat Nature Hall in a contest for Storm City's auction house? However, as Nature Manifestation finished his statement, Shifeng revealed a dark gold crystal from his bag. The crystal was unusually eye-catching in this room, and it drew everyone's gaze. While most of the reception room's occupants didn't understand why Shifeng had revealed this crystal, Nature Manifestation froze when he saw it. "You? How did you get that?" Nature Manifestation could not help but ask. Nature Manifestation's sudden change of expression even confused Fire Dance and her companions, let alone Nature Hall's members. No one knew why the Nature Hall's almighty guild leader would seem scared of a single crystal. "Do you really need to ask?" Shifeng said, revealing a faint smile. "I am the player responsible for activating Thunder Axe City, of course. Is it so strange that I have this crystal?" The item in his hand was none other than the Thunder Axe crystal, which was capable of teleporting a large number of players to Thunder Axe City. It also normally cost 5,000 Thunder Axe City contribution points. "You activated Thunder Axe City? That is impossible. How could you be responsible?" Nature Manifestation stared at Shifeng with an incredulous look. Thunder Axe City was a super large-scale neutral city, and after its activation, it had quickly become a hub for many superpowers, including Nature Hall. Countless first- and second-rate guilds visited the city, as well. The neutral city was so popular due to its abundant resources, especially incredibly rare epic materials. Thunder Axe City was practically a treasure trove. However, traveling to and developing in Thunder Axe City was quite difficult. Due to its terrain and environment, not even expert players could remain in the city for long. Even with its sturdy foundations, Nature Hall could only afford to send 300 experts to develop in the city long-term. However, not only did Shifeng possess the Thunder Axe crystal, which one could purchase from the Thunder Axe Temple and provided convenient transport to the city, but he was also responsible for Thunder Axe City's activation. However, when Nature Manifestation recalled the group of giant players Zero Wing possessed and the Thunder Axe crystal in Shifeng's hand, which no player should be able to obtain at this stage of the game, he knew that Shifeng's claim was likely true. "Guild Leader Nature, what's wrong? You don't look too good. Should I call a doctor?" Shifeng asked, chuckling at Nature Manifestation's deathly pale expression. Chapter 2077, Nature Hall Submits. As Shifeng's calm voice continuously echoed throughout the room, Nature Manifestation's expression twisted into something ugly. Traces of fear flashed in his eyes, stupefying Nature Hall's members. Nature Manifestation stood at the very top of the Storm Empire. A single word from him could decide the life or death of the Empire's various guilds. He was also a bona fide peak expert. He could lead Nature Hall to become an overlord in God's domain in the future. Yet, now, Nature Hall's members weren't the only ones surprised. The guild leader's reaction confused Fire Dance and her companions. Nature Manifestation had reacted calmly even when Fire Dance had taken him captive, yet now, he seemed more afraid of Shifeng's few sentences. Why wouldn't they be surprised? What do you want? Nature Manifestation asked as he watched Shifeng, afraid. If he had only seen Shifeng as a domain realm expert before, he viewed the man as a monster, capable of shaking Nature Hall's very foundations. After learning that this swordsman had pioneered Thunder Axe City and acquired the Thunder Axe Crystal. Most people were still unaware of Thunder Axe City. Even in Nature Hall, only the guild's upper echelons and the experts that had visited the city knew about its splendor. According to their understanding, Thunder Axe City should have activated more than 2 weeks ago. The various superpowers, however, had only discovered the city 9 days ago. When Nature Manifestation thought about how Shifeng could send a large number of players to the city with the Thunder Axe Crystal and the man's status as Thunder Axe City's pioneer, he couldn't help but shudder. Epic materials were even more important than expert players in the auction arena's battles. Zero Wing's members had already proven their combat power. If the guild also had a wealth of epic materials, Zero Wing could pose a significant threat to Nature Hall in the upcoming auction arena contest. Meanwhile, Deep Thunder, Jade Qilin, and Nature Hall's other upper echelons stared at Shifeng in fear. They had counted themselves fortunate to send 300 experts to Thunder Axe City, but Shifeng was actually responsible for activating the neutral city. Nature Hall is so powerful. How could Zero Wing ever hope to compare? Shifeng laughed. He then said, "We are only here to help Twilight Echo learn whether or not it can withdraw from the Storm Empire in safety. You shouldn't overthink the situation, Guild Leader Nature." Fine. Out of respect for Zero Wing, our issue with Twilight Echo stops here. As long as Twilight Echo leaves the Storm Empire, Nature Hall will let it leave, Nature Manifestation answered through gritted teeth. Even Nature Hall would struggle to take out experts like Fire Dance, Cola, and the others. If Zero Wing dispatched a large number of experts and relied on the epic materials it gained from Thunder Axe City, he wasn't confident that Nature Hall could hold Storm City. After all, Thunder Axe City had a frightening supply of epic resources available. If Zero Wing took control of Storm City's auction house, Nature Hall's development would be severely affected. Even if Zero Wing failed, it could still force Nature Hall to dispatch more forces than planned, which would, in turn, ruin the guild's plans to claim other cities' auction houses. As Nature Hall's guild leader, Nature Manifestation couldn't sacrifice the guild's larger plans just to punish Twilight Echo. Moreover, he suspected that Zero Wing had far more trump cards than what it had revealed in this reception room. Of course, this was only his conjecture. The fact that Shifeng had pioneered Thunder Axe City was already frightening. Nature Manifestation couldn't think of what could be even more impressive than that. When Nature Hall's reinforcements heard their guild leader's decision, their jaws dropped. They couldn't believe what they had just heard. Just who is this Black Flame? Nature Hall's members grew more curious about Shifeng. This man had actually forced their guild leader to compromise with just a few words. No one would believe this if they told them. Nature Manifestation had even chased the 9-star family out of the Storm Empire. How could he possibly submit to a guild from a small kingdom? Guild leader Nature is quite open-minded. Chapter 2078, Twilight Echo Shaken. When Twilight Echo received the news of Nature Hall's withdrawal, silence reigned of the guild leader's office. The dozen or so guild upper echelons in the room didn't know how to react to this development. Nature Hall gave up. But why? What did Zero Wing's members do? Nature Hall had intended to use Twilight Echo as an example to stabilize its rule in the Storm Empire and expand its influence past the Empire's borders. Nature Hall had been adamant on destroying Twilight Echo. They had been discussing their safe withdrawal from the Storm Empire and their defense against Nature Hall, but after nearly an hour, their despair had only intensified. The difference between their two guilds was too massive. At this point, Nature Hall only needed a fraction of its strength to remove Twilight Echo from God's domain. Even with Zero Wing's help, they didn't think that they could withstand Nature Hall. Zero Wing was, after all, only on par with a first-rate guild. Yet, Nature Hall had unexpectedly withdrawn its assault. They couldn't help but wonder how Zero Wing had accomplished the feat. A powerful background? A transaction? They considered many possibilities, but none seemed reliable or possible. However, it was an inescapable fact that Zero Wing had convinced Nature Hall to leave Twilight Echo in peace. Dark Wave turned to Aqua Rose, a myriad of emotions overwhelming his heart. When Violet Cloud had informed Owl Life that Zero Wing intended to protect Twilight Echo, Dark Wave had assumed it had been Zero Wing's way of taking a stand against Nature Hall. He hadn't actually believed that her guild could protect his. Looking at it now, however, it seemed that Violet Cloud had meant what she had said. This was the Storm Empire's overlord they were talking about. Although he did not know how Zero Wing had stopped Nature Hall, its success in doing so proved the guild's strength. When Aqua Rose had left Twilight Echo to join an insignificant, upstart guild from some backwater kingdom, many of the guild's members had mocked her for her foolishness. They had all thought that she was stupid. If she hadn't been so stubborn, she would have kept her position as an honorary elder and had access to plenty of opportunities to display her talent. Twilight Echo had been a veteran first-rate guild for decades, not a force a small guild without a background could compare to. Who would have thought that the small, insignificant guild Aqua Rose had joined would grow to become so powerful? Not only was Zero Wing Star Moon Kingdom's overlord, but it also commanded the strength of a first-rate guild. Now, it had saved Twilight Echo from the brink of destruction, convincing a superpower like Nature Hall to abandon its plans. After this series of events, Dark Wave couldn't fathom how powerful Zero Wing truly was, despite the fact that he led a veteran first-rate guild. If news of this reached Twilight Echo's guild elders, the old fellows and company representatives that had mocked and ridiculed Aqua Rose would likely die from embarrassment. They had all played a major part in dismissing her from her position as honorary elder. Due to this incident and her position in Zero Wing, Aqua Rose would have considerable influence in Twilight Echo from now on. The guild might even follow her whims. Dark Wave wasn't the only one to think this. Every upper echelon in the office realized the implications of today's events. Their views of Aqua Rose had utterly changed. Aside from her joy, Aqua Rose was stunned, as well. She hadn't imagined that Sherfone would actually be able to stop Nature Hall. Shortly after, Violet Cloud relayed Sherfang's latest message to Twilight Echo's upper echelons, informing them that as long as the guild left the Storm Empire, Nature Hall wouldn't take further action against it. If they had the help of a powerhouse like Zero Wing, settling in their new home would be far easier. Meanwhile, news of the events between Nature Hall and Twilight Echo soon reached God's domain's many superpowers. Nature Hall was one of them, and even though this incident was a small matter in the other superpowers' eyes, it was still necessary to watch the situation. Or Empire, Crimson Flame Fortress. How can Nature Hall be so dumb? It gave up such a good opportunity to stabilize its position in the Storm Empire just because of Zero Wing? Did Zero Wing offer the guild some massive bribe? Jing Yang, who stood inside Blackwater's vice guild leader's office, ranted his confusion after reading the latest message. Nature Hall had been developing rapidly lately, and it easily ranked among the top 10 fastest developing superpowers in God's domain. Many veteran super first-rate guilds were even starting to feel threatened. Yet, out of respect for Zero Wing, the guild had abandoned its plans. It was truly surprising. Not bad. It seems Zero Wing is quite capable, after all. It's no wonder why it rejected my offer of cooperation, Xuan Wuchisa said, a charming smile forming on her face. Vice Guild Leader, you think too highly of Zero Wing. I don't know what benefits it offered Nature Hall to settle this matter, but Zero Wing hasn't solved its predicament in White River City. Ignoring the several powers that desire the city's auction house, Zero Wing has its hands full with its own internal problems, Jing Yang said. Starlink has recently invested a lot of capital into hindering Zero Wing. It is even trying to poach Zero Wing's upper echelons and core members by offering to triple their current salaries. Starlink has also begun to claim commissions meant for Zero Wing by offering lower prices, slowly chipping away at Zero Wing's financial situation. I doubt it will be more than a month before Zero Wing crumbles in on itself. Larger guilds had both advantages and disadvantages. When a guild had a low member count, its daily expenditures were relatively small. Hence, its finances were easy to handle. However, as a guild grew, it would face more difficult financial problems. Including hostile corporations' intervention, a guild's financial problems could become even more challenging. Hence, although Zero Wing seemed to have grown quite powerful, it had acquired new weaknesses. Zero Wing had still been a relatively small guild without a headquarters in the real world, and as a result, it hadn't had to contend with major expenditures. Its size had rendered hostile corporations' interference ineffective, but things had changed. Now, not only had Zero Wing purchased Ouroboros's main headquarters, but it had become even larger than Ouroboros at its peak. Its monthly expenditure was easily dozen of times larger than Ouroboros's had been. This was why the various first-rate guilds feared the various superpowers. Not only could a superpower crush a first-rate guild under its military might, but it could also launch an economic assault. Meanwhile, after Shifeng's party returned to Star Moon Kingdom's White River City, he sent Fire Dance and the others to continue their team dungeon raids and collect as many epic materials as possible to prepare for the auction arena. It's about time that I deal with my elemental cores. Shifeng grinned as he opened his bag to inspect the elemental cores within. He then altered his appearance using the demon mask and visited White River City's teleportation hall. Spending 4 gold, 30 silver, he teleported to the distant Sea of Illusion. Chapter 2079, Sea Tribe Weapon. Sea of Illusion, Blue Coral City. Shifeng was disguised as a level 61 swordsman as he walked through Blue Coral City streets. Unlike the kingdoms and empires on the God's Domain continent, the Sea of Illusion was neutral territory, maintained by a merchant alliance. The merchant alliance mainly operated out at sea, controlling only a few cities on land. Most of its towns and cities had been established on islands. Because of this, most visiting players were either merchant players or independent players. Guilds rarely visited the Sea of Illusion. This was also why adventurer teams ruled over the area's several major cities. Meanwhile, Blue Coral City was the Sea of Illusion's largest city. First-time visitors were almost always surprised by what they found here. The majority of the player population consisted of merchant players, while the rest were mostly independent players. There were very few players wearing guild emblems. Buying tons of Sea Tribe weapons for 50 silver each. Also selling purple fire crystals. Selling ocean pearls. Get a 5% discount for buying more than 100 pearls. Urgently selling 3 Sea Tribe weapons for 1 gold, 70 silver. Players busied themselves as they set up stalls along the city streets, selling a large variety of items. This wasn't typical of cities in normal kingdoms and empires. Sea Tribe weapons? Shifeng slowed to a halt when he heard the advertising players. He vaguely remembered that Sea Tribe weapons had been popular for a time during his previous life. They had once been items that all naval players had desired. The Sea Tribe weapons could be traded to the Sea of Illusion's NPC forgers to commission crafted weapons, which would allow players to exhibit greater combat power in battles at sea. Weapons that had been made with Sea Tribe weapons were 15% to 20% stronger than normal weapons of the same rank, a considerable improvement. Only, trying to craft a high-quality naval weapon was not easy, and the production success rate wasn't 100%. If one wanted to commission a level 60 secret silver weapon, they'd need 3 Sea Tribe weapons, and the production success rate would only be 50%. A level 60 fine gold weapon would cost 5 level 60 Sea Tribe weapons, and the success rate was only 30%. To put it simply, the higher the desired weapon's quality was, the more Sea Tribe weapons a player would need, and the lower the production success rate would be. Meanwhile, players could only acquire Sea Tribe weapons by killing the level 50+ members of the Sea Tribe. Hence, complete naval weapons were incredibly expensive on the market. Of course, Sea Tribe weapons had another purpose, and Shifeng knew it. Purchasing secret laws. Secret laws were extremely rare in God's domain, even rarer than combat techniques. They also provided players a significant boost. Secret laws were a type of berserk skill, but unlike normal berserk skills, which were prohibited in certain areas, secret laws could be used anywhere like combat techniques. They could even be used when silenced. However, secret laws were a huge burden on the user's stamina and concentration. The more powerful a secret law was, the more stamina and concentration it would consume. In addition, players didn't have to master a secret law to use it. Only, using an unmastered secret law would drain more resources than usual. The worst part was that secret laws would drop automatically when players died. Even so, countless experts in God's domain coveted secret laws due to their many benefits. Secret laws provided a boost to physique and allowed players to exhibit more of their combat power. Moreover, secret laws gave players a clearer idea of their flaws. These were the reasons that players had coveted secret laws. They were even more valuable than combat techniques. Meanwhile, Sea Tribe weapons could be exchanged for one of these precious secret laws. Although there were limited copies of the secret law available and the process of acquiring one was particularly troublesome, Shifeng didn't mind. He might have had some trouble purchasing a few copies if he had tried before visiting the ancient god's maze, but he shouldn't have any issues now. One needed to fulfill two conditions to purchase copies of the secret law. First, they'd need to locate the NPC that sold them, then, they'd need to obtain the required items for payment. The NPC only accepted a combination of Sea Tribe weapons and elemental cores. Other than Shifeng, it wasn't likely that any of God's domain's players knew about this NPC, and of course, collecting Sea Tribe weapons and elemental cores wasn't a problem for Shifeng. Following which, Shifeng spent 10 silver to set up a stall in Blue Coral City's business district. Buying Sea Tribe weapons for 60 silver each. Only buying a certain amount. First come, first served. Shifeng shouted, immediately attracting the attention of the players on the street. Normally, players only purchased Sea Tribe weapons for 50 silver each. Even players that set up stalls to sell the weapons asked for less than 60 silver. With someone willing to spend so much on each Sea Tribe weapon, players were bound to notice. A short moment later, a large group of players crowded around Shifeng to sell their Sea Tribe weapons, rapidly depleting Shifeng's funds. In less than an hour, Shifeng had spent more than 2,000 gold, purchasing 4,352 Sea Tribe weapons. He had basically purchased every Sea Tribe weapon in Blue Coral City. Once customers stopped visiting his stall, he packed up and headed for a hotel to alter his appearance once more. When Shifeng left the hotel, he discovered several players hiding around a street corner, staring intently at the hotel's entrance. It was obvious that these players wanted to learn why he had bought so many Sea Tribe weapons. Unperturbed, Shifeng found a deserted location and used the 7 luminaries ring to teleport out of Blue Coral City. After using space movement and spatial gate 4 times in a row, Shifeng arrived on a volcanic island that housed monsters ranging from level 80 and level 100. These monsters were far from ordinary, with the weakest among them a chieftain that had the combat power to rival players who reached the trial tower's 3rd floor. Even ordinary Tier 2 experts of the same level would have a difficult time fighting these chieftains one-on-one. Meanwhile, the NPC that possessed the secret law copies was located in a hidden room within the volcano. Players had only learned of this NPC in the past thanks to a few players who had visited the island for a rare quest. They had accidentally stumbled across the secret room, finding this rare NPC. Very quickly, with the help of Gale Domain, Shifeng reached a cave inside the volcano. After killing several hundred level 83+ Lord-ranked lava monsters, he finally found a hidden room. Although the cave's monsters were all lords, they had dropped almost no loot. They hadn't dropped anything beyond some ordinary materials, not even a single piece of common equipment. Although the monster's loot was terrible, the EXP they granted was astounding. After killing several hundred monsters, Shifeng had finally risen from level 70 to 71. As he opened the door to the hidden room, Shifeng was greeted by the sight of a dark, empty room. It only contained a stone platform. Shifeng grew a little excited as he approached the platform, spending 100 magic crystals to light the candle upon it without hesitation. By the time the public had discovered this place in the past, the players that had pioneered the island had cleaned out the NPC's stock of secret law copies. Although the stock would replenish from time to time, the various superpowers had already laid claim and monopolized the NPC. Small guilds like Shadow had only been able to watch and drool from the sidelines. As the candlewick ignited, a storm abruptly enveloped the room. The translucent figure of a man began to materialize before Shifeng. After an inspection, one would discover that this man was a level 80, tier 2 professional mage named Horus. However, when Shifeng inspected the man with omniscient eyes, he discovered that the NPC was actually a level 180, tier 5 divine mage. If players gave in to their greed and tried to rob this NPC, only death would await them, a particularly cruel death. "Young adventurer, are you the one who has awakened me?" Horus asked as he watched Shifeng with eyes swallowed by dark blue flames, his gaze chilling. "Yes, Lord Horus." Shifeng nodded respectfully. As a deceased entity, Horus abhorred the living. If Shifeng disrespected him, he'd get nothing from this NPC. "Very good. When I was alive, the king of the sea tribe hunted me down and killed me. Now, I want revenge on the sea tribe. However, I cannot leave this place, so I want you to be my instrument of vengeance, slaying the sea tribe's members. As proof of your achievement, you may bring me the sea tribe's unique weapons. Once you complete this task, I will reward you handsomely," Horus said. Although the NPC's tone was calm, the rage in his eyes was apparent. "System, you have accepted the epic quest, The Wrath of the Dead. Quest content: kill sea tribe members and obtain 3,000 sea tribe weapons. Rewards unknown." Chapter 2080, Epic Rank Reward. An epic quest? Shifeng was slightly astonished when he heard the system notification. He had never heard of Horus giving out an epic quest in the past. He had only known that this NPC wanted sea tribe weapons in a bid for vengeance against the sea tribe. The quest in the past had only been an advanced hidden quest, requiring 1,000 sea tribe weapons to complete, and a player had to finish the quest before they could trade with Horus. Now, not only was the quest epic rank, but its completion also required 3,000 sea tribe weapons. This massive change ruined his plans. In the past, the activation quest had awarded the Ocean's Heart design, an intermediate magic array design. Although Ocean's Heart was only a barrier-type magic array, it could suppress sea monsters to a frightening extent. Ocean's Heart was even effective against mythic monsters and extremely useful to guilds trying to develop their naval prowess. The Ocean's Heart's magic array scrolls had sold for astronomical prices in the past. Of course, now that the quest had changed, its reward would be different as well. "It seems I'll have to come up with a different method." Shifeng sighed deeply as he handed Horus 3,000 sea tribe weapons. The various major powers on the main continent had already reached a developmental bottleneck. As a result, these powers had begun to compete over the sea's resources. Fortunately, Zero Wing already had its own shipyard, many advanced speedboats, and control of several coastal towns and naval cities. Immortal Light, Zero Wing's subordinate, had also been developing its naval strength under Shifeng's orders and was now a significant power at sea. However, with how quickly the various major powers were developing, Zero Wing would struggle to maintain these advantages. Shifeng had wanted to rely on the Ocean's Heart to accelerate the guild's development at sea, but now, he had no choice but to look for other avenues. As Shifeng gave Horus the sea tribe weapons, the NPC's eyes glowed with excitement. "Wonderful. There are indeed 3,000 sea tribe weapons here." Horus nodded in satisfaction, his hand abruptly flashing with a bright glow. When the light subsided, he held an ancient tome. I went to great lengths to obtain this book. Hopefully, you can make good use of it. If you obtain more Sea Tribe weapons in the future, you can find me to trade them. When Horus finished speaking, not only did Sherfong obtain the tome, but he also earned an abundance of EXP. Not only did he instantly level up from 71 to 72, but he also gained 2 additional legacy skill points from completing the quest. The quest rewards were incredible. It was much harder to level up after reaching level 70, and Sherfang's hidden class required twice as much EXP as normal players. An ancient forging book? Sherfang's eyes widened in shock when he inspected the book he had earned from Horus. Ocean's Heart didn't have much use to individual players, but the magic array was quite important to guilds. If possible, he wanted to trade 3,000 Sea Tribe weapons for the array design. However, after seeing the ancient forging book, this thought vanished. In God's domain, ancient forging books were akin to alchemy secret journals. Not only were they unique items, but the weapon or equipment designs they contained were also extraordinary. An ancient forging book was almost as valuable as an ordinary epic forging design. Sherfong immediately opened the ancient forging book, eager to discover what item it would help produce. Amazing! I struck gold this time. Sherfong could not help his growing elation as he read the tome's contents. The ancient forging book Horus had given him didn't contain one weapon or equipment piece design. Rather, it contained the designs to produce the dark gold set equipment, crystal light set. Although it was only a level 60 to level 80 set, it was an 8-piece set equipment, possessing more set effects than its 6-piece counterparts. If a level 60 player equipped the crystal light set, their combat power would be on par with a player wearing a 6-piece level 65 dark gold set equipment. At this stage of the game, the various superpowers could only dream of owning 6-piece level 65 dark gold set equipment. Anyone seen wearing such a set would even earn peak expert's envy. Chapter 2081, Stormy Winds. Star Moon Kingdom, White River City. Although White River City was not the kingdom's capital, its popularity overshadowed Star Moon City as the main headquarters of the kingdom's #1 guild and home to the Candlelight trading firm, which continued to introduce one new product after another. At this point, White River City had become the kingdom's capital in the hearts of Star Moon Kingdom's players. Since White River City was the only city in the kingdom to be promoted, its fame had reached new heights. Tons of players from foreign cities and countries visited the city every day, and it had become almost as prosperous as an ordinary empire's imperial capital. Over a dozen level 64 players in gorgeous equipment had gathered on the second floor of White River City's auction house. They all wore the same guild emblem as they watched the fight in the auction arena. Contempt filled their eyes as they looked down on the combatants. As expected of a small kingdom. Although the local players' equipment standards are quite good, their combat standards are terrible. They're not even a match for some second-rate guilds in our Dark Knight Empire. It's no wonder why Zero Wing lords over Star Moon Kingdom, a level 64 berserker said as he watched several guild players from Star Moon Kingdom fight in the auction arena in ridicule. The berserker had not held back his opinion. With the physique of Tier 2 players, the combatants had heard him clearly even from 50 yards away. However, none of those players dared to comment against the berserker. They all simply lowered their heads and remained silent. This berserker had earned the right to such arrogance. This level 64 berserker had won 20 matches in the auction arena in a row. Quite a few of the berserker's opponents had been peak experts from Star Moon Kingdom, but none of them had dropped the berserker's HP below 80%. This berserker had even fought 2 opponents at once and still maintained his HP above 80%, winning the match. Moreover, the berserker's identity was extraordinary. This berserker was Dust Blood, one of the 10 great experts from the Dark Knight Empire's Bloodbath family. The Bloodbath family was a veteran first-rate guild, and at this point, it was the strongest guild in the Dark Knight Empire, excluding the 3 resident superpowers. The Bloodbath family also occupied a medium-sized kingdom and a small-sized kingdom. No ordinary first-rate guild could hope to compare to its strength. Although these guilds are very weak, Zero Wing's title as Star Moon Kingdom's overlord proves that it has some ability. Furthermore, Zero Wing has 4 experts that rank on the God's Domain experts list. Black Flame, in particular, has killed many superpowers peak experts thus far, a young man in dark gray robes said. Zero Wing's name had already become commonplace in the Dark Knight Empire. After all, the guild had successfully helped the 100 Flowers Palace stop Starlink's invasion in Moon Creek Town. The incident had surprised the Empire's various guilds, all of which had immediately investigated Zero Wing. However, the more they looked into Zero Wing, the more the guild surprised them. These guilds hadn't been surprised by Zero Wing's rapid development in God's domain, but by the number of frightening powers Zero Wing had provoked. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's 9 Dragons Emperor, the Evil God's Temple, Pantheon, Blackwater, Miracle, and the Dark Knight Empire's Starlink. All of these guilds were powerful enough to make even a first-rate guild like Bloodbath Family shudder in fear, yet Zero Wing had provoked every one of them. The fact that Zero Wing had survived this long was unbelievable. Calling it a miracle wasn't an exaggeration. Zero Wing's success will soon reach its end. The various superpowers have been busy with their own matters, so none of them have bothered to retaliate. I've also heard that Zero Wing has a tentative alliance with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Phoenix Rain. But things have changed. The various superpowers have set their sights on White River City, and even if Phoenix Rain makes a personal appearance, she can't change Zero Wing's fate, Dust Blood said, sneering. The fact that Zero Wing had 4 experts that ranked on the God's Domain experts list was impressive to other guilds, but the achievement meant nothing to the various superpowers. The God's Domain experts list focused on players' battle records, not their overall strength. God's Domain had many experts that hadn't accumulated eye-catching battle records, yet wielded peerless strength. Take the Bloodbath family, for example. Bloodbath family's expert members were even stronger than the Refinement Realm experts on the God's Domain experts list, but none of them had actually made it on the list. To put it simply, only small guilds and independent players took the God's Domain experts list seriously. It was merely an information source for true major powers, not an indicator of a guild's strength. Moreover, the competition for an NPC city's auction house didn't rely on war weapons or tools. Instead, it relied on a guild's resources and experts. The competition prohibited artificial strength, so the war weapons Zero Wing had been lucky enough to acquire would be useless. With how few experts Zero Wing possessed, it wouldn't even be able to defeat veteran first-rate guilds like Bloodbath Family, much less the various superpowers. I guess you're right. The various superpowers will not give up on White River City's auction house. Some of the old monsters that usually hide in the shadows are even revealing themselves to ensure their guild's success in the competition. Even experts on the God's Domain experts list will be of limited use, the young man nodded in agreement. When he spoke of the various superpowers' old monsters, fear and yearning flashed in his eyes. Thus far, the fights between God's Domain superpowers had been nothing more than skirmishes. Large-scale battles between these major powers were rare. Moreover, to nurture the younger generation, the various superpowers' true experts typically avoided their guild's affairs. They kept to themselves, quietly increasing their strength. If these old monsters took action, how would the younger generation acquire any fame? Even the younger generation's greatest prodigy was a joke before these old monsters. Zero Wing is certainly unlucky. It could have remained the king of its mountain for some time. Unfortunately, White River City was promoted too quickly. Now, even its dream of standing atop its mountain as king would shatter. I've heard that even King's Return, Blackwater, and Pantheon have arrived to compete for White River City. I can't wait to see these superpowers tear Zero Wing apart, Dust Blood said, smiling. Oh. Look over there. Even the Glory Empire's holy reincarnation has come. It seems that they're here to watch the fight between these superpowers, as well, the young man said suddenly as he pointed to a group often or so players that had just arrived in the second-floor hall with a smirk. Holy Reincarnation was also a veteran first-rate guild, strong enough to rival the Bloodbath family. It was also the second strongest guild, after King's Return, in the Glory Empire. While the various kingdoms and empires' powers gathered in White River City in anticipation of the auction house's struggle, Shifeng worked on crafting the crystal light set in the nearby Candlelight trading firm. Although up to 10 players could learn the crystal light set's production method from the ancient forging book, it was an 8-piece dark gold set equipment. Not even basic master forgers like Melancholic Smile and Cream Cocoa would have much success with forging the set. Furthermore, Melancholic Smile and the others had their own work to focus on. Hence, Shifeng decided to craft the set equipment himself. Fortunately, acquiring the required materials was no trouble for Shifeng. Zero Wing had been growing stronger as time passed, and as a result, it had compiled a ton of materials in the guild warehouse. In addition, the Candlelight trading firm had joined the secret chamber of commerce. So, obtaining the necessary materials to forge the crystal light set equipment was quite easy for the guild. Chapter 2082, Timeless Equipment. Did it succeed? Shifeng could not help but grow a little excited as he gazed at the 8-piece set equipment on the table before him. Although he had more than 10 sets of materials on hand, the crystal light set was top-tier dark gold set equipment, its production difficulty only second to epic equipment. Although he had already become an intermediate master forger and with the help of the philosopher's hand, performed as an advanced master forger, successfully forging the crystal light set was incredibly difficult. Theoretical success rate, after all, had nothing to do with the actual forging process. In the game's early stages, the main god system had simplified the various production processes to their base limits to allow players to familiarize themselves with god's domain's subclasses. However, as players reached higher levels and adapted, the main god system would gradually withdraw its assistance, and the various production processes would become more complex and detailed. Meanwhile, successfully forging a dark gold set equipment was a massive threshold for lifestyle players. During God's domain's ancient times, weapons and equipment had only fallen into 2 categories, ordinary and extraordinary. More categories had only been added after the ancient gods had fallen. Ordinary equipment split into bronze, mysterious iron, secret silver, fine gold, and dark gold ranks. Extraordinary equipment had been broken down into epic and legendary. Dark gold weapons and equipment were considered the peak of ordinary equipment, hence, they were extremely difficult to obtain and produce. Without a larger power support, an ordinary expert player would be limited to dark gold weapons and equipment at best. Meanwhile, dark gold set equipment was at the very apex of ordinary equipment, the best available without any flaws. No matter how high one raised their theoretical production success rate, a single mistake would result in failure. There was no room for error when crafting dark gold set equipment. One could argue that crafting dark gold set equipment was even more difficult than producing epic items, since the latter allowed for some mistakes. Only, the theoretical production success rate was much lower compared to dark gold set equipment. As Shifeng began to inspect the crystal light set before him, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System, crystal light set has been successfully forged. Forging proficiency increased by 200 points. Obtained 10 million EXP. As expected of an 8-piece, dark gold set equipment. It provided so much proficiency. Shifeng was elated when he saw the system notification. Even forging ordinary dark gold weapons and equipment awarded very little proficiency after reaching intermediate master rank. Normally, he'd be lucky to get 3 points for each success. This was why a player needed so much time to rise to advanced master rank after becoming an intermediate master. Now, forging a single crystal light set awarded 200 proficiency points, the equivalent of crafting nearly 70 pieces of dark gold equipment. However, the crystal light set's attributes were the true reason for Shifeng's joy, not the system's reward. The crystal light set was a top-tier dark gold set equipment, and due to the enhancement the temporal sand provided, the 8 pieces' basic attributes had risen by 10%. Purely comparing basic attributes, ordinary epic equipment had around 20% to 30% higher attributes than the normal crystal light set, but the temporal sand had reduced that by 10%. There was no doubt that the set equipment before him was currently the best ordinary equipment available in the game. If he hadn't been wearing several pieces of epic equipment with beneficial effects, Shifeng would have immediately replaced his items with the Crystal Light set. Of course, Shifeng didn't stop after this success. He immediately began to forge the next set. As time continued to flow, the day of the auction house's struggle had finally arrived. White River City was particularly lively. Today, the various powers would battle to determine their future territories. As a result, countless players from Star Moon Kingdom and its neighbors had gathered in White River City. At this point, the city's player population exceeded 50 million. Now, nobody can save Zero Wing, Unknown King said, sighing. Mu Lingsha lowered her head in disappointment. While the various major powers entered the auction house and eagerly awaited the competition's start, a group of players wearing 6 winged emblems entered the arena. The leader of this group was none other than Shifeng. Chapter 2083, Grand Gathering. When Zero Wing's members arrived, the atmosphere in the auction arena changed immediately. The various major powers' representatives couldn't help but shift their gazes to Zero Wing's players. Not only was Zero Wing Star Moon Kingdom's overlord, but its main headquarters was also located in White River City. Moreover, it had amazing growth potential and a very high chance of becoming a super first-rate guild in the future. To put it simply, the guild was in its heyday. If Zero Wing secured the management rights to White River City's auction house, not only would it solidify its position as the kingdom's overlord, but it would also have a stable source of income, further increasing its chances of becoming a superpower. However, rather than envying Zero Wing's players, the various major powers members only watched them with pity or delight. They actually dared to show up. Dust Blood, who stood outside of the arena, sneered when he saw Zero Wing's members. Do they really think that they can secure this auction house just because their headquarters is located here? Zero Wing had only dispatched a little over 100 players to the auction arena. It was a significant number compared to the various large guilds, who had only sent around 30 players each. In fact, the size of its group was only second to the various participating superpowers. However, most of the large guilds attending the competition were only there to spectate. They didn't actually plan to compete, so they hadn't needed to send a lot of members. The fact that Zero Wing had sent so many players proved its intentions. The guild would be participating in the competition. Although Zero Wing was Star Moon Kingdom's overlord, the Bloodbath family simply considered the guild a mere mountain king. It wasn't an issue if Zero Wing strutted around its kingdom normally. However, even the Bloodbath family had only sent around 40 players to such a grand event to gain experience, yet Zero Wing had dispatched more than 100 players to try to win this competition. Zero Wing simply overestimated itself. Maybe Zero Wing is putting up a final fight for its survival, the gray-robed young man said, sighing. After all was said and done, White River City was Zero Wing's main headquarters. If another power claimed the city's auction house, Zero Wing would lose the foundation it had spent so much time to build. The loss would be unimaginably dire for the guild. The competition for dominance in God's domain grew more intense as time passed. If a guild failed to keep up with the changing times, the gap between it and others would only grow. Losing one's main headquarters during these rapidly changing times would be fatal, especially for a new guild like Zero Wing. Its members had yet to acquire a sense of belonging and cohesiveness with how recently the guild had been established, and it wouldn't be surprising to see Zero Wing disband shortly after losing White River City. Unfortunately, everything weaker than the various superpowers was nothing more than an ant. This was the case true for a top-ranked first-rate guild like the Bloodbath family. At one time, the Bloodbath family had been recognized as a pseudo-super first-rate guild, but it was still no match for Starlink, Unyielding Soul, and Crimson Emperor in the Dark Knight Empire. The Bloodbath family was also wise enough not to harbor thoughts of antagonizing these three superpowers. In the virtual gaming world, unless one was on the brink of becoming a superpower, they couldn't truly understand what a superpower was. To the various guilds and players in God's domain, superpowers were at most, guilds with greater financial strength and more experts than their weaker companions. Most didn't understand that the difference between a superpower and an ordinary power didn't lay in quantity, but in quality. Meanwhile, when Mu Lingsha saw Nature Hall's members from her top-floor VIP room, her expression turned grim. It's over. It's really over. Blackwater, Starlink, and Nature Hall. Every one of these guilds was stronger than Unyielding Soul. Not even her guild would casually provoke any of these three superpowers, yet Zero Wing had angered all of them. All of Zero Wing's enemies smiled joyfully, especially Sky View and Shadowlight Axe, the former guild leaders of Warring Empire and Knight's Judgment. Zero Wing has an alliance with Nature Hall? Glaring hatefully at Shifeng, Sky View hissed, so what if you have Nature Hall support? Nature Hall might not fear Blackwater and Starlink, but it is only one superpower. There are more than two superpowers for White River City. I refuse to believe Nature Hall can defeat them all. Sin Realms members nodded in agreement. This competition for the auction house was unique, and even if Nature Hall helped Zero Wing defeat the participating superpowers, there were others in God's domain. Zero Wing would not change its fate of losing White River City. However, while the crowd discussed the relationship between Nature Hall and Zero Wing, two players, one young and one old, approached Shifeng. These two were none other than Mu Lingsha and Unknown King. Guild leader Black Flame, I am Mu Cheng. My granddaughter, Lingsha, has recently been in your care. If Zero Wing encounters any trouble, please feel free to request my help. Although I have withdrawn from the front lines, I dare say that I am still a capable fighter, Unknown King said, chuckling as he glanced at the various major powers in the auction arena. Sin Realm and the other superpowers that were so eager to watch Zero Wing's downfall were stupefied after watching Mu Cheng and Mu Lingsha speak with Shifeng. What? Why is Thousand Hands doing here? What relationship does Zero Wing have with Unyielding Soul to warrant a personal visit from its former guild leader? The auction arena stirred at Mu Cheng's appearance. The various major powers weren't the only ones surprised by this old man's arrival. Many independent players were just as shocked to see Mu Cheng. Mu Cheng was one of the older generation's experts. He had been a big shot in the virtual gaming world when Unyielding Soul had been at its peak, and when he had still been active, everyone had known his nickname, Thousand Hands. He had been known as one of the top 3 assassins in the virtual gaming world. If his physical deterioration hadn't forced him away from the front lines, Unyielding Soul wouldn't have fallen to its current state. Why wouldn't everyone be shocked to see such a big shot greet Zero Wing and offer its help? Deep Thunder, who stood a short distance away, was also surprised to see this old man. He hadn't considered that Zero Wing would have such deep ties to Unyielding Soul, so much so that Unyielding Soul's former guild leader would make a personal appearance. Deep Thunder immediately raised his evaluation of Zero Wing. Who is this Black Flame? 2 superpowers have actually shown up to support him. Dust Blood's eyes nearly fell from their sockets when he saw Mu Cheng talk to Shifeng. Although Mu Cheng had retired and was no longer at his peak strength, he could display a significant portion of his abilities with the latest virtual reality technology in God's domain. He definitely shouldn't be underestimated. If Mu Cheng really lent Zero Wing a helping hand, the outcome of this competition would be uncertain. Damn it. Why? This has to be a trick. Sky View was utterly flabbergasted. First, Nature Hall had offered its support, and now, so did Unyielding Soul. He simply couldn't keep up. Unlike the players in the auction arena, the spectating crowd outside grew excited with the sudden development. No one had believed that Zero Wing had any backers, and despite its hopes of becoming a super first-rate guild, its chances were actually quite slim. However, they now realized that they had been mistaken. Not only did Zero Wing have 2 backers, but both were also true superpowers. Factoring in Zero Wing's development speed, the likelihood of it becoming a super first-rate guild was extremely high. Nature Hall and Unyielding Soul? Galaxy Past, who sat in one of the spectator rooms on the 2nd floor, couldn't help his bitter smile as he watched Deep Thunder and Mu Cheng. He had thought that Star Alliance had significantly shortened the gap between it and Zero Wing. He hadn't expected that Zero Wing had hidden so much power. He had watched Zero Wing grow from nothing, and he had assumed that he had seen everything the guild had to offer. Unfortunately, it seemed that he still underestimated Zero Wing's strength. Meanwhile, Purple Eye watched Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow, who stood beside their guild leader, in envy. She had thought of the two women as rivals, but now, they were utterly out of her reach. They all wore Starlink's guild emblem, and the dozen or so players in the lead possessed several epic weapons and equipment, wearing no less than level 60 dark gold items. A faint glow enveloped these dozen or so players as if they were the incarnations of gods. Mu Lingsha was stunned. Not even Unyielding Soul's main force was likely a match for these players. Sure enough, they've come. Mu Cheng's expression gradually became serious as he watched the leaders of Starlink's force. Chapter 2085, Glory. There were many experts in the magnificent auction arena. Some among them even served as pillars in their large guilds, and there were quite a few peak experts from the various superpowers. However, when Starlink's members entered the arena, everyone gasped as they felt the intense pressure emitting from these players. Starlink's members didn't feel like players, but great lords. The crowd subconsciously submitted as those players' aura washed over them. Even peak experts felt the threat of death from the dozen or so Starlink members in the lead. Why are they here? Deep Thunder's expression similarly changed when he saw Starlink's members, surprise and fear flashing in his eyes. Grandpa, who are those people? Why do even superpowers peak experts seem afraid of them? Mu Lingsha could not help but ask as she watched the various spectating superpowers peak experts in confusion. While it was true that Starlink's members were strong, the watching peak experts were as well. Even if there were a difference between superpowers' strength, there should be no reason for the spectating peak experts to fear Starlink's experts, but every one of their faces twisted with anxiety. Her grandfather, Mu Cheng, was a true domain realm expert, and his nickname of Thousand Hands was no trivial matter. Although he had grown weaker with age, he could still easily handle peak experts. However, when her grandfather saw the dozen or so players leading Starlink's team, he seemed to share the spectating expert's trepidation. She found this situation truly baffling. Zero Wing really has no chance in the struggle for White River City now. Mu Cheng could not help his bitter smile as he watched Starlink's leading members. He had thought that they could help Zero Wing hold White River City with the combination of Nature Hall's assistance and his fame. After all, the various participating superpowers had their own NPC cities to prioritize. They would only be able to dispatch a limited portion of their strength to secure White River City's auction house. However, it seemed he had underestimated Starlink's feelings toward Zero Wing. Are they really that strong? Mu Lingsha was even more surprised by her grandfather's comment. They're not just strong. Against these people, even veteran super guilds like the Battle Wolves and Sacred Temple would have to take their opponents seriously. Otherwise, their defeat would be almost guaranteed. Mu Cheng explained as he watched the four white-haired men among Starlink's team. To think that Starlink would recruit the four shadow demons. I've known that Starlink has been gathering an extraordinary amount of strength in secret, but I hadn't thought that it was so capable. Even Unyielding Soul is likely in danger. The four shadow demons? After giving the name some thought, Mu Lingsha asked in surprise, are they the four lunatics that shook up the various superpowers years ago? The four shadow demons had been very well known more than a decade ago, but unlike the name suggested, these four didn't operate as a group. They hadn't even known each other, acting independently. These four people had earned the nickname for shadow demons because of how much trouble they had caused the various superpowers, killing countless experts and peak experts. Not even Unyielding Soul had been spared from the four shadow demons' mischief. All four of these players were madmen. Moreover, they were independent players, and as a result, the various superpowers had a very difficult time tracking them down and dealing with them. During the height of their troublemaking, these four had been a hot topic among the general populace, so the secret pavilion had named them the Four Shadow Demons, a nickname that had spread across the virtual gaming world. The various superpowers had the greatest headache trying to deal with players like the Four Shadow Demons. Not only were they extremely powerful, but they were also insufferable lunatics. With all four of these madmen here, it was easy to imagine how frightening this competition would be. Meanwhile, hundreds of players wearing Blackwater's guild emblem sat quietly in one of the top-floor VIP rooms. The inflexible, middle-aged man who led the group looked down at Sherfone, watching the swordsman with a smug grin. Chapter 2086, Expert Foundations? White River City fell silent as the sound of the starting bell echoed throughout its streets. Almost everyone's breathing quickened in anticipation as they stared intently at the magic mirrors lining the business district, afraid to miss a single moment of the upcoming struggle. Many players outside of White River City had pulled up Star Moon Kingdom's official forums to watch the live streams. For a moment, this competition had rendered the entire kingdom silent. The spectators in the auction arena itself tensed as they quietly watched the massive globe of water that had appeared above the arena. The gigantic globe displayed the qualifying rounds rules, which were unlike those of any competition previously held in the auction arena. The previous competitions had been fighting tournaments or betting matches between players. The rewards had been subpar, and very few players had been interested in taking part, although any player could join these competitions. However, since this competition involved the management rights to White River City's auction house, the system had set up a qualifying round before the official matches. Only those who passed the qualifiers could join the official struggle. If one failed to meet the requirements, all of the resources in the world couldn't help them. It's just a qualifying round, yet the participation fee is so high. The spectating players gasped and they saw the participation cost of one epic material. Epic materials were still incredibly rare among the various large guilds. An ordinary large guild would be fortunate to accumulate around 30 epic materials. Such items even had an extremely low drop rate in 100-man, hard-mode team dungeons. Moreover, the main god system had reduced the drop rate to 0 for players that exceeded the dungeon's level limit to prevent players from abusing low-level team dungeons. Sending low-level members to grind these team dungeons was also useless for a guild. These players wouldn't be able to raid the dungeons even if their guilds gave them top-tier equipment. Team dungeons tested players' combat standards as well as their equipment standards, and it would be extremely foolish for a guild to have its members with high combat standards maintain low levels. As players reached higher levels in God's domain, they'd encounter more fortuitous opportunities. Instructing experts to remain at a lower level would ruin the guild and the player's development. Because of this, the various major powers had stockpiled very few epic materials. Yet, the auction arena charged one epic material per participant, and every participating power had brought at least several dozen members. However, despite the crowd's sentiments, more than 100 powers paid the participation fee. Starlink, in particular, paid for more than 400 participants. When they saw this, the spectators couldn't help but shudder. Even the independent players watching from outside of the auction house couldn't help but gape in shock. Everyone had known before this that the various superpowers shouldn't be provoked and possessed wealth that far surpassed first-rate guilds, but they were still blown away when they saw how many members the various superpowers had dispatched for this competition. Moreover, this was only for one city. Many of these superpowers were contesting for multiple cities. Superpowers could truly kill people with wealth alone. So, this is a superpower? Melody was even more distraught when she saw how many Starlink members would take part in this struggle. Setting aside its members' combat standards, the fact that Starlink had the financial strength to dispatch more than 400 players was enough to devastate second-rate guilds like Ninth Heaven. The competition for the auction house didn't operate like a fighting tournament. In the official competition, players would be evenly distributed onto 5 separate, spacious battlefields. Players would then have to slaughter each other and claim the energy crystals that would randomly fall from above. Whichever power had the most energy crystals at the end of the competition would secure the auction house's management rights. However, not only were players prohibited from using tools on the battlefield, but they were also banned from using large-scale spells. The main god system truly was intent on testing the participating powers' comprehensive strength. It didn't allow any trickery whatsoever. Although Zero Wing had dispatched 112 players to this competition, even more than top-ranked first-rate guilds like the Bloodbath family and Holy Reincarnation, it paled in comparison to Starlink's 400-plus members. Moreover, King's Return had sent 300-plus members, Blackwater had dispatched 200-plus, and Pantheon had arrived with 200-plus members. None of these superpowers should be underestimated. The other superpowers were mostly here to watch, not planning to compete for White River City. So, they had only paid for a few members to participate for the experience. Although the various superpowers foundations had shocked the crowd, what happened next utterly stupefied everyone watching. Each of the qualifying rounds participating players was teleported to an independent room, all of which had over a dozen trolls. The weakest of these trolls was a lord, while the strongest was a great lord, and each room had a total of 3 great lords. All of the trolls were level 65, slightly higher than the participating players' average level. Players had to defeat 3 level 65 great lords and more than 10 level 65 lords in the qualifying round. Even ordinary experts would flee from such a monster group, yet the system wanted them to survive against these monsters for 1 minute. To make matters worse, players couldn't use tools. Many of the expert players in the arena despaired and they saw how difficult this qualifying round would be. Is the system joking? The system must be crazy. I can't even last 30 seconds against 1 level 65 Great Lord, much less against 3 of them. At first, many of the watching experts had hated themselves for not having any epic materials and losing out on the perfect opportunity to make a name for themselves, but after seeing the qualifying round's challenge, they were relieved. If they had paid to participate, they would have wasted an epic material for nothing. As expected of the auction house's struggle. This is amazing. The qualifying round already has such high standards. This trip here was definitely worth it. The standards are indeed quite high. I'm afraid that most of the participants will be disqualified during this round. Only those superpowers will have a significant number of experts make it to the true competition. The small guilds that are trying to make a name for themselves will likely be disappointed. Although, aside from those superpowers, I'm fairly certain that the Dark Knight Empire's Bloodbath family, the Glory Empire's Holy Reincarnation, and the Purple Thorns Kingdom Sin Realm will have quite a few members past the qualifying round. That's probably true. Not only are those guilds supported by powerful corporations, but they also have plenty of expert members. Zero Wing really is unlucky. It should have had a fighting chance since it dispatched 40 or so more players than the participating first-rate guilds, but after this round, Zero Wing will likely have far fewer members in the official competition than the first-rate guilds. That's right. Although Zero Wing has been developing wonderfully recently, it hasn't had enough time to develop to a sufficient level. Its foundation simply cannot compare to veteran first-rate guilds. If Zero Wing had accepted some major company or corporation's investments, it would have likely been a match for guilds like the Bloodbath family and Sin Realm. Everyone talked about the competition's qualifying round. They all had guesses about how many players from the participating guilds would make it to the competition after this round. However, nobody questioned the various superpowers' performances, comparing the first-rate guilds' abilities instead. Chapter 2087, Passing Rate? What's going on? I thought Zero Wing only sent 112 members. How did so many of them pass? The players in the auction arena stared with wide eyes when they saw how many Zero Wing members had made it through the qualifiers, unable to believe their eyes. The various major powers waiting for the official competition's start were just as baffled. Impossible. The system must have made a mistake. Skyview practically shouted when he saw the numbers on the water globe. Zero Wing had only paid for 112 participating members in the qualifying round, yet 107 of them had made it through. This passing rate was absolutely horrifying. Only about 55% of the teams from top-ranked first-rate guilds like Bloodbath Family, Sin Realm, and Holy Reincarnation had passed the trial. Even then, it was impressive. Ordinary first-rate guilds like the Star Alliance only had a 40% passing rate. As for the various participating superpowers, even the best-performing guild, Blackwater, had only managed 88% of its team, yet 95.5% of Zero Wings members had cleared the qualifying round, surpassing Blackwater. No matter how Skyview thought about the situation, he couldn't believe it. Superpowers had plenty of experts and detailed training programs that were particularly efficient when nurturing players. Ordinary powers simply couldn't compare. Moreover, the players that were powerful enough to be considered for this competition were the various powers experts among experts. Yet, Zero Wing had surpassed all of them. Skyview wasn't the only confused player. Not even the various major powers members could fathom how Zero Wing had built such a powerful foundation. Zero Wing is amazing. Its passing rate is even higher than those superpowers. Didn't they say that Zero Wing hasn't had enough time to develop, and its foundation regarding expert players is weak? Why do I feel like Zero Wing's expert foundation is even stronger than those top-ranked first-rate guilds? When the independent players watching from outside of the auction house saw Zero Wing's passing rate, they re-evaluated their opinions of the guild, especially the expert players from other kingdoms and empires. Based on the passing rates, it was, more or less, clear that Zero Wing's expert foundation was no weaker than top-ranked first-rate guilds. In fact, it might even be slightly stronger than its competition. The difference is actually so great. Galaxy Past was at a loss for words as he stared at the magic water globe. He had thought that the Star Alliance had a chance against Zero Wing's expert foundation. After developing for so long, the Star Alliance had grown considerably. Nowadays, God's Domain's popularity continued to increase, and more people joined the game every day. As a result, more experts continued to rise. Not only had the Star Alliance successfully nurtured a lot of experts, but it had also recruited experts from elsewhere. The guild was many times stronger than when it had joined God's Domain. However, only 40% of the Star Alliance's players had made it through the qualifying round, while 95.5% of Zero Wing's players had succeeded. No matter how Galaxy Past looked at it, the Star Alliance wasn't on the same playing field as Zero Wing. Meanwhile, when Melody, who watched from a private spectator room, saw the passing rates, the darkness in her eyes vanished. She couldn't help her growing excitement as if she had just seen a ray of hope illuminate a dark sky. However, despite Melody's elation, the half-elf man beside her remained unperturbed. "I'm assuming that you think Zero Wing now has some hope of holding White River City, right?" the half-elf man said as he glanced at Sherfone, who stood in the auction arena. "Unfortunately, that is still impossible. Zero Wing's passing rate is amazing, but no matter how many players made it through the last round, Zero Wing still only has 107 members participating in the official competition. Compared to the 4 participating superpowers, that is nothing. Even Pantheon, the superpower with the fewest members in the competition, has 68 more players than Zero Wing. At the end of the day, this competition is a test of a guild's comprehensive strength. Zero Wing might be able to deal with top-ranking first-rate guilds like the Bloodbath Family and Holy Reincarnation, but it doesn't have the power to contend with superpowers. But, although Melody wanted to argue, she knew his words were true when she saw how calmly the various superpowers members had reacted to Zero Wing's results. Even the various top-ranked first-rate guilds, whose members had been surprised to see Zero Wing's success a moment ago, regained their composure as they realized that the strength Zero Wing had displayed did nothing to change its circumstances. Meanwhile, an old man in black armor with a slightly hunched back stood at the lead of King's Return's team in the auction arena. After taking a look at the water globe, this old man smiled and turned to Mu Cheng, who stood a short distance away. "Brother Mu, long time no see. I hadn't expected to see you in action again." "I certainly didn't expect to find you here," the hunchbacked man said, smiling. "You're here as well, so what's so strange about my presence?" Mu Cheng asked the old man. Although his tone was disdainful, vigilance filled his gaze as he addressed the hunchbacked, old man. He was vigilant because this man was one of King's Return's old monsters. He had risen to fame more than 3 decades ago, earning the nickname Blind Man. While his nickname sounded demeaning, the older generation's expert players knew it was by no means an insult. In fact, it was the highest form of praise. This old man was truly blind in the real world, but since virtual reality games connected to the brain directly, they allowed people with disabilities to function as if they had none in the game world. Naturally, those with sight disabilities could see normally in the game world. However, not only did Blind Man recover his sight in virtual reality games, but his sight was also far sharper than the ordinary person's. By relying on his superior sight, he had carved a place for himself in the virtual gaming world. The secret pavilion had even called him the all-seeing sword saint. Even when Mu Cheng had been at his peak, he had only been able to win 4 out of 10 fights with Blind Man. I've heard that you have a close relationship with Zero Wing, is that true? Unfortunately, our King's Return has a little enmity with one of that guild's little fellows. How about this? If you don't help Zero Wing, we won't target the guild, Blind Man asked, chuckling. Blind Man's suggestion rendered Mu Cheng speechless. It seemed that Zero Wing wasn't satisfied with provoking superpowers like Starlink and Blackwater, but it had provoked King's Return as well. However, when Mu Cheng saw that more than 200 people standing behind Blind Man and compared them to the dozen or so subordinates behind himself, he could not help but nod helplessly, replying, "Fine, it's a deal." Mu Cheng then turned to look at the distant Shifeng and muttered to himself, "This is the most I can do to help you." When the various major powers members overheard the old man's conversation, they couldn't help but send Zero Wing sneers and looks of pity. Zero Wing is always so arrogant, provoking so many superpowers. Now, these superpowers want retribution. Ha ha ha. So what if more than 100 players from Zero Wing made it through the qualifiers? In the end, its efforts mean nothing. Now that Zero Wing had lost one of its capable supporters, its chances of holding White River City had fallen even further. Time passed quickly. After another 2 minutes, the qualifying players were distributed across 5 different battlefields. Each battlefield was the size of a small leveling map, easily accommodating tens of thousands of players. The rules for this competition were quite simple. The competition had a 3-hour time limit, and throughout its duration, energy crystals would randomly fall into the battlefield. The power that secured the most energy crystals after 3 hours would be crowned as the victor. When the bell rang throughout the 5 battlefields, the official competition began as every player in Star Moon Kingdom watched. Everyone, listen up. Prioritize Zero Wing's members above all others. When the competition began, the various major powers issued commands to target Zero Wing to curry favor with the various superpowers. I found some of Zero Wing's members here. Good. Get rid of them first. We'll fight for the energy crystals later. As soon as the major powers members discovered Zero Wings, they charged toward them. Zero Wing? Die. Skyview sneered when he saw the beauty observing her surroundings. He immediately charged at the woman from Zero Wing alongside a dozen or so of his subordinates.